Let's see.
Is there anything,
I need to read?
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do a roll call vote. We know we have a few board members that are still going to be getting online before we take any action. We'll do a secondary call, but we're just going to start the meeting with a roll call. Board Member Rill. Board Member Booth. Board Member Booth is out of town. He has a flight this afternoon, so I guess just make note of that. Board Member Bogus. Board Member Klein. Board Member Davis. Here. Vice Chair Earl is here. Board Member Green is also, she's out of the country right now. So, Board Member Hart. Vice Chair Hart, sorry. Board Member Carey. Board Member Wood. Board Member Davis. Here. Board Member Hymas. Vice Chair here. Board Member Lear. Oh, thank you. Board Member Hymas. Board Member Lear. Board Member Norton. She's online. Okay. So she is online. Board Member Straight.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, thank you. Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And then Chair Moss has some obligations with his work this afternoon. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start with information, and then we'll circle back to the action items towards the end. Oh, we do have a quorum? One, two. Okay. Well, I think we'll start with information. I can acquire a few more people. So go ahead. Superintendent Coleman, do you want to start your meeting? Oh, he already did turn it over. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and board members. It's a pleasure to be here. I've got two financial reports to present. The first one is the fiscal year that ended June 30th. These are nearly complete financials, and I say nearly complete because we always wait for the state to do their calculation of the other pension and employment benefit costs. That's probably coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So our expense will increase, not dramatically, but they will go up. And our surplus of our revenues, or I should say our expenses, will go up that exceed our revenues. As you may remember, we were given direction to spend our carry forward balance down, and I'll report on that. We were successful in getting a lot of contracts finally bid out and completed during the fiscal year. So let me just highlight the revenues that we received were just over $54 million. Our expenses were $57,268,751, giving us a balance or leaving us in a deficit position of $3.3 million. Now, you may remember we started the year off with about $7 million in cash. We now we're still financially solvent. We end with $1.8 million in cash. So kudos to our facilities manager for getting these projects bid out and completed and spent. So I think that's good news.
So may I ask a question?
Yes.
Does that mean that the 1.8 would be termed as or looked at as the carry forward for this year?
Yes, previous to the OPEB charge that will be coming in the next few weeks.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to understand that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and Carl, you should also mention that we also have some accounts receivables that will increase that balance slightly.
Okay, thank you. So as Superintendent Coleman referred to, we have the district billing contracts for the greater than 3%. We have about $900,000 in accounts receivable. We'll be getting that in this month or next month in collecting. So we're really going to have about 2.7 million. The 1.8 million is about 3.3%. So our reserves are pretty skinny to run a large operation. And so we're happy that we spent it down, and now we're going to have to start being very judicious and fiscally responsible.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
The number of students served hasn't changed, so I'm not going to go over that. The balances of the land grant enrichment funds, donated funds, and education fund, Kelsey, just the page up above that, are the same, so I'm not going to go over that. Maybe I will. The land grant enrichment fund, we ended the year with just a little bit over $1,051,000. It's on the financial report, Kelsey, above. Oh, no, you're fine. I'm sorry. So just down there on the bottom left, the land grant enrichment funds is $1,051,000. Donated funds is about $281,000, and our education foundation is $1,150,000. Okay, the next report is the budget status report that just gives all the supporting documentation. And I think, Chair Earl, you asked about 6 weeks ago for us to kind of talk about how do we tie in the financial report into this budget status report. The key is on this budget status report that Kelsey has up right now, the far right column, can you see the funding source? The top four are dedicated credits. We've got some in federal and then state. And so those, everything in green represents money, which is our sources of funds. So if you go back to that first report, and I don't think we need to toggle back and forth, but we can, is the top left box is this revenues or sources of revenue. So if you want to tie in and add up all the numbers in that gold column received by state, that will add up to those numbers: state, federal, dedicated credits, and agency transfers. Now, the agency transfers are the transfers from your office for the various grants that we apply and receive. The largest part of that is our transportation money, which was just about $5 million this last year. And if you remember, when we presented the budget, we estimate that's going to go up to about $6.9 million this year. So if you go through this and want to go through that exercise and have any questions, please call, and I'd be happy to walk each of you through how that is working. But the column, the code is on that far right, dedicated credits, federal, state. And in the state, we also have agency transfers. But the state money, Kelsey, can you toggle down just a little bit on the green? The state is, you see the education funds, the second from the last line? That's the state money. That's the money coming from the legislature, what they appropriate to us to run our operations. And that's what the Public Education Appropriations Committee and the Executive Appropriations Committee approves. And that's the funding the Division of Finance transfers to us 1/12 every month of the approved amount. So, Madam Chair, any questions that you or the board members may have on that on the June 30th?
Yes, Board Member Wood, you have a question?
I just have a question on your land trust funds.
Yes.
Is there any carryover limit on that, or do you
No.
have, so you can just save it or spend it as you see fit
It all
according to your
rolls
plan?
forward because it's all the students. The trust fund is not, doesn't expire on us. So we can roll that forward every year. The donated fund is exactly the same way. And the foundation is a separate legal entity, and so that money doesn't lapse as well. You're welcome.
Do we have any online with hands up or Adele? Any other questions?
If
ahead.
no, the last report is on our enrichment fund. Kelsey, if you could pull that up. This is through the fiscal year, June 30th, 24. We overspent a little bit for the various activities, which is fine because you may remember we have over $1 million in enrichment funds. The project spending through June 30th totals $718,291. You had authorized, no, 631,600. So we overspent by $87,000. And we've got both associates here that could talk about some of their enrichment fund projects that overspent. The amount we have for this year, for fiscal year 25, we'll talk about that in just a minute. But it was a good year. A lot of last month I think we're talking, or maybe this month we're talking about all of the summer camps that we had, very successful, and a lot of great learning opportunities for our kids. So, any question on the enrichment fund spending, Madam Chair?
Questions? And are you saying someone's going to kind of address the why we overspent? Is that what you said?
Only if there's any questions that anyone wants to get specifics on. You can see each one of those projects, and that column in the green, second from the far right, just shows the projects that went negative.
So I would, maybe my question isn't necessarily related to that, but it is moving forward, maybe overestimating a little bit, maybe instead of underestimating. Does that make sense on some of these projects, really looking at those? And I guess we could look and see why, whether it was additional gas or students or whatever, I don't know.
Some of it was additional students' participation. Dr. Tanner, I think, wants to respond.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to explain, for example, the extracurricular activities for the deaf. You remember we corrected this in our last meeting. We had split out some of the expenses, and then we had personnel expenses going in one place and the actual operations going in another. And so we have corrected that. It's going to be just straight coming out of here 400,000 instead of in two different places, because when we divided it up, we divided it out evenly between those two pots of money. And it turns out personnel expenses are a lot more than the operating of the activities. Some of the other things, like the San Francisco sailing experience, that's actually also prepping for another sailing experience, because it just is an overlap between 2 years, last year's activity and this year's. So you see almost a combo effect there, because the last year's activity happened in July, and then the next one happened in June, and so they kind of overlapped a little bit. That's why that one went up on that expense.
Okay.
And then Lieutenant Patton.
I have a hard time. I had a hard time looking at the numbers because I couldn't see them. So I'm so sorry. We had our big expense was a 7048 this year, and we did not overspend because what we spent was very needed. But we had to have some additional safety training. Our captain actually went to a training that was quite expensive. So that was an over that we won't be doing that in the future. We don't have the 7048 until 2026. But that we were over on that one. And then as far as, it's the same thing that Michelle was talking about with the extracurricular and our expanded core curriculum as far as the personnel is concerned, and with that overspending. So we do have tools in place that we're not going to be overspending in this next year. And so there we go.
Maybe I can add one little thing too. None of this was a surprise. It was during the course of the year, after the funds were approved, that we made decisions with the authorization of the advisory council to add additional children, for example, if we had more kids than we thought would come. And because of the surplus in this fund, we spent it, and then all of a sudden, we knew all along what we were doing, and we would not have approved money that we didn't have. So it's not something that we have to really be worried about in the future.
Okay, perfect. All right. Anybody have questions online? Okay, we can move to the next item.
The next financial report, Madam Chair, is for the month July 31st that ended. So not a lot of activity, so I'm going to go through this really fast. The biggest item is the state transfers to us the 1/12 of the annual appropriation, and that is about almost $8 million. So we received that, and then we received about $600,000 in transfers from your office. A large part of that is probably the transportation to cover our Wasatch transportation contract for busing the kids. Our expenses, as you see in that second box on the left, is, yeah, on that page, Kelsey, so you're good, is, remember, personnel is about 80% of our total expenses. We didn't have a complete month of payroll, so we only had around $780,000, and then just some miscellaneous expenses. So our expenses were $880,000, leaving us a surplus of about $3.5 million. So no surprise, July is like this every single year. Next month we'll have more payroll and another transfer, but our expenses will be going up to track our sources of revenue. No students yet to report as of July. Let's see, are we on the right report? I think that is the 2024, Kelsey. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, let me just give you the verbal on that. Our revenues exceeded our expenses by about $3.5 million. So that adds to our cash balance of that 1.8. So we're in financially solvent position. No students to report. Our land grant enrichment fund went down just a little bit to $1,043,000. Our donated funds, roughly $280,000, and our education fund is $1,151,000. And then I'm just going to jump to enrichment funds. We spent like $9,600 of the $1.2 million that has been authorized. So everything looks good as we close out the year, and we're happy that we spent down the carry forward. And the start of the year, there's no surprises that have come to our attention. So I think everything looks good financially, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any additional questions anyone has? Okay. Board Member Davis, go ahead.
Sometimes I hate asking questions because it exposes my ignorance. I have a question on your monthly expenditures chart. And this is such a basic question, and I think I may have even asked it before. Can you remind me again, what is the difference between the total students receiving services and the total student services provided? Are those like discrete visits, or are those like this student receives OT, PT, and something else?
Yes, it's multiple services being received, and I'll defer to Dr. Tanner or Susan Patton or Superintendent Coleman on that. This is an area, don't feel bad about asking that question. We've wrestled with this over the last 5-6 years, how best to aggregate these numbers, so I'll turn the time over to them.
Yeah,
Board Member Davis, your second assumption was the correct one. Some students received more than one service. And so we wanted to quantify those for the board as well as the number of students themselves.
Got it. So it's not like this student had 3 visits, or 3 OT sessions. It's this student has 3 different providers providing different services.
Yes,
Perfect.
It's the type of service.
Thank you so much.
I think also, if I may add, this helps the legislature understand the intense needs of our students and showing why we have as many personnel as we do. So that's why we kind of ended it this way of presenting the numbers.
Anyone online? No? Okay. All right. Next item.
That concludes my financial reports. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, Superintendent Coleman.
Okay, thank you. The next item is actually item 1 on the published agenda, which is district billing contracts exceeding $100,000. As you're aware, board members, even though you approve the budget ahead of time, we also get a second approval on any individual purchases or contracts that exceed the threshold of $100,000. What we've done in the supporting documents here is giving you a spreadsheet with all of the contracts we have with all of the school districts and charter schools around the state. But they are marked board approval for those few that exceed $100,000 of contract. Most of these we provide according to your board administrative 3% rule. We provide at no charge. When a district exceeds the 3% of the children in the state threshold as their student population, then they are required to provide their own services or contract with us or someone else for services. So those who have decided to contract with us essentially pay for.
Okay, thank you. So we're looking for a motion,
No,
right?
it-
Or questions?
You
Oh,
froze, Joe.
oh, goodness, sorry. Are you done speaking?
Oh. Yeah, that's fine.
You keep
We just need your approval
I
on
don't know if
those
you realize that,
contracts.
but once in a while we have a little glitch in your presentation.
No
so
problem.
It ended abruptly and, okay,
No problem. Those are the contracts that need to be approved by the board that are over that threshold.
okay. Are there any questions related to these contracts? Anybody online? Okay. Did you, okay. I'm looking for a motion then. Leanne, Board Member Wood?
I move that the board approves the district contracts exceeding 100,000.
Okay, a second. And that was Board Member Straight with a second. And any discussion to that motion? Anyone online? Okay, we will go ahead and take a vote on the motion. The motion before the board is that the board approve the district billing contracts that exceed $100,000 for USDB. And let me start at the top. So Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't have Klein on? Okay. Board Member Davis?
Yes.
Okay. Vice Chair Earl is a yes. Vice Chair Hart?
Yes.
Board Member Hymas?
Yes.
Do we have Board Member Carry On? Okay. Board Member Lear? Board Member Norton?
Yes.
Board Member Rill? Board Member Straight?
Yes.
Board Member Wood?
Yes.
And Chair Moss has a commitment. 6, 7, that's 7. Did I miss someone? Oh, Board Member Hymas. We do have 8. So that passes. All right, we'll go to the next item.
I have a question.
Oh,
Okay,
you
the
have a
next
question?
item is the,
Just one
Sorry.
moment. We have a Board Member Davis, you have a question?
I was just wondering why the amounts aren't listed on the other contracts. Is it just because they're under the 100,000? You just didn't include them?
There are
Okay.
no amounts. So on those contracts, we just write in our agreement a memorandum of understanding of how we're going to work and interact with that district or charter school. So there is no amount, there's no compensation between those districts, only those that are 3%. So there are amounts on others that are below 100,000. Those are amounts. So only the 3% districts have amounts.
That's so interesting. I would have thought it would be reverse of that. That the 3% wouldn't have the amounts and the others would be paying for their services.
No,
Well,
It's
the
those
3%
over
paying.
3%
Well,
are
like Davis
paying.
District is over 3%,
Yes, so they would have
but
a
they don't have an
contract with,
amount on their contract. They have a,
We
like
have-
they,
Go to the section on compensation, it should show the amounts on that, Board Member Davis.
in the contract,
Yes.
They're not.
I mean, it
Oh,
just says-
because that's easy. That's because the service that is being provided is deafblind services, and that is provided at no cost.
Yeah,
It covers
so,
the entire
so
state.
so like Davis is over 3% district, however, they're not compensated for us because the only service that we are providing at no cost to every district is deaf-blind services, and that's the only service that Davis District is receiving.
from USDB. They're servicing their students on IEPs, that they're just not using you as that service provider.
Right.
Right. So the
Yeah.
only service they provide is the one that they just indicated.
I will take additional questions offline.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
for
you're
helping me.
good. That's okay. It's good. These are good questions. So, yeah. All right. Okay, go ahead, Superintendent Coleman.
Thank you. So the next item is the request for the board support on USDB's draft legislative funding requests for the 2025 legislative session. This is the list that was presented to you previously in previous meetings, and board leadership has placed this on the agenda to get board support for presenting this to the legislature in the upcoming session.
Okay, there is a slight change. Would you mind articulating what that is? There's a change from this one and the last one.
Yeah, it was a very minor change.
Yes.
There was added an IT staff member on there with the growth in services. We've stretched our IT people pretty thin.
Okay.
And so that's really what that was about.
Okay. Is there any discussion to this item? I think we had a little bit of discussion before related to, if you give me just 1 second, let me pull up my agenda. Sorry, I should have had this up on. Just the question around the deaf mentors. And the reason I'm asking the question is if we end up with a tight legislative session and they're only going to fund part of this, is this one of those recommendations or an optional recommendation? Could that be to have those funded where they've previously been funded? Does that make sense? Versus cutting some of the other areas. I'm just trying to look at options if we're not able to get the full amount of the other funding. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, that's a really good question. The deaf mentors, for many years we had a surplus in the enrichment fund balance because before the board and USDB created the enrichment program protocols, the trust land money was coming in. So for all of these years since then, we have been paying the deaf mentors out of the enrichment funds. Now that we only have about $1 million left in surplus, instead of a couple million, 2 or 3 million, we've drawn down that fund to the point where those need to be shifted over to our normal personnel out of operational expenses. And so in the case they don't fund it, it's possible probably for one more year that we could fund that out of enrichment funds, but that money's going to dry up, and we don't want to dig into the money for the actual activities for the students. Right. And so we thought this is the most appropriate time to pull it over.
Thank you. We appreciate the fact that it's here because this is where it should reside, right? And I guess just as we move things forward, the question just becomes, if there's less funding, maybe some of these things would still need to be used with more flexible accounts or something. So, and I'm just wondering if that's still available if that happens.
Yeah.
Ideally, it would be good if the legislature funds them, right? So.
Yeah, the real story is that I think we've done a good job of what the taxpayers would expect and just sweeping all the funds together to cover growth before we go and ask for more. And now that those funds are drawn down and we have very thin margins, it's the appropriate time to request more. So yeah, we would probably be able to do it for one more year because it's about a $600,000 ask, but that would leave us with very, very little excess money in the enrichment fund.
Okay.
And so, and we would just go ongoing, it's about $1 million a year to fill in. So.
Okay, let's see if there's any other questions.
The rest.
Oh, go ahead.
I will say this, the rest of the needs on there are things that are required by board rule and state and federal law. So none of these things are extras that we're not required to do by you as the board.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? Do we have anyone online that's got their hand raised? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion then. You what? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Board Member Davis.
Thank you. Two questions, actually, if it's okay, Chair. One was, oftentimes when we go up, they say, well, can you change any of these ongoing requests to a 1 year only just for this year because of the difference in funds? Most of this looks like personnel. So I mean, would that be entirely impossible, or is there a way to say we could hire on a contract for 1 year or something of that nature if push comes to shove and the fiscal analyst really asks us to do that?
Well, you can see some examples of where we've done that. For example, the school counselor was funded through ESSER funds, and we knew those were not ongoing, but it was a need that we had that qualified for that. And so now we're coming back. And so the legislature does say that, but they also ask us very clearly not to fund ongoing needs with one-time monies. We've done that here. If you see the bolded FY25 items, those are the ones we would be out of compliance if we didn't fund those this year. And so we've used one-time money this year, hoping that the legislature would fund it ongoing from here on out. And so your question is appropriate, and we don't have any of these really that would be able to be, we can't meet both of their demands to
Sure.
fund one time, but not fund ongoing expenses with one time money.
The quandary we all have. Can I ask my second question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and thank you for that. So I'm looking down here at Tooele. Did Tooele bump back above, or are they down below the 3% because they lost the MyTech students?
They're below the 3%, so it impacts us differently.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure why we need. And then, for example, I was wondering why we would have on the need for Eagle Mountain and Saratoga Springs, because they would definitely be above the 3%. So why do we need?
And I can certainly answer that, Board Member Davis. That is because of the charter school growth. We do serve all of the charter schools in Alpine District, so that's where we're seeing the growth there.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any online questions? Okay, once again, we open for a motion from the board. Looking for a motion.
I'll do that.
Okay, Board Member Straight?
Is it written anywhere, or do I just make it up?
It is written. It's written in stone somewhere.
Oh, I need to put my glasses on. Okay, here we go. I move that the board identifies those that's the wrong one.
That's not the. It would sound like this.
Is it subject action request for board support? Is that it? I
Yes.
move that we approve the request for board support on USDB draft legislative funding requests for the 2025 general session.
And do I have a second? Okay, seconded by Board Member Davis. The action before the board is that the board requests for board support. Am I reading that right? Okay, board support on USDB draft legislative funding requests for the 2025 general session. And any discussion to that? Anybody online? Okay, we will go ahead and vote then. Board Member Bogus.
Yes.
Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Vice Chair Earl is a yes. Board Member Hart, Vice Chair Hart.
Yes.
Board Member Hymas.
Yes.
Board Member Carey.
Yes.
Board Member Lear, we don't have yet. Board Member Norton.
Yes.
Board Member Rill. Board Member Straight.
Yes.
Board Member Wood.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That was unanimous with 9 votes. And we will go to the next item on your agenda.
Thank you. The next item is a short presentation about Utah Schools for the Deaf extracurricular programming. This is just a short video.
I don't know if you have, I'll do a little intro on that video as we get ready. So we talk about all the activities we do for summer camps, after school camps, and to give you an idea, what I'd like to do is I'm going to introduce you in this video to the director of our extracurricular activities to just give you an overview of the expanse of the programming, what it looks like. I don't know if it's up. Is it? I can't see it online, but maybe it's up there in the boardroom. But Jonathan Hegelson is our extracurricular director. He manages and coordinates all of the different events and activities that we do. One of the things I want to emphasize as we go through these things is often the things that are overlooked. So you're going to see 50 summer camps that we did and a myriad of other after-school events that we have conducted. Keep in mind that in the background, during the summer camps, we have facilities who's trying to clean up our facilities and get them ready for the new school. And then the second thing we've got going is we've also got the finances who are trying to roll up the end of the school year and get that ready. So in addition to doing that, the business office is making all the purchases, making sure that we're getting the money we need to get these done, and facilities is taking down and cleaning up different rooms, getting them ready for a summer camp, and at the same time they're cleaning up the school to get ready. So it's when we say this is a family endeavor or a school endeavor, it truly is a school endeavor. We all work together to get it done. I have ready, in case this happened, I do, if I'm allowed to share my screen.
Oh,
Okay, you've got it.
They've got it.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll just roll the video.
Hello, I am Jonathan Helgeson, the Athletic Director and Extracurricular Director for the Utah Schools for the Deaf, or USD. Here at USD, we offer many sports and activities to any student with hearing loss throughout the state of Utah. For high school students, our sports program offers football, volleyball, basketball, and cheer. For all students, we provide after-school activities twice a week that include board game nights, crafts, kindness club, service projects, skiing, hiking, rock climbing, cooking, reading club, in addition to so many more. We even partner with Thanksgiving Point to provide different activities for our students. Our students have enjoyed study abroad experiences in countries such as Egypt, India, Italy, Germany, Thailand, and Peru. Recent stateside adventures have included, for history, Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, for robotics, Alabama, for drone competition, Tennessee, for ROV and drones, Texas, for sailing, Boston and California, for basketball, Oregon, Arizona, Washington, Idaho, and New Mexico, for RIT's math competition, California, and for Academic Bowl, Washington, D.C. and New York. We have provided many amazing summer camps for deaf and hard of hearing students. Amongst many of these include our STEM camp, our aquarium camp, our swim camp, a camp at Wheeler Farms, and our art camp, in addition to so many other camps. We partner with many other entities, including Deaf West Theater, the Sanderson Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, many other schools for the deaf, universities such as RIT, UVU, and Gallaudet, other schools all over the Salt Lake Valley, community groups, and the National Ability Center. We here at USD thank you so much for your support for our students and these amazing programs.
So now you can see why it went over that budget, which is pretty impressive that we were able to do the things that we did that you saw on that list for that budget, which is pretty amazing. When we partner with RIT or the STEM camps, those are often associated with grants. And so one of the things that happens with the STEM camps is as we participate, they buy the products that we get to use in our classrooms the remainder of the school year. Those drones, those ROVs, the VEX robotics, all of that, and computers, an embroidery machine. They brought a whole bunch of stuff that we get to maintain and keep for our classes in our classrooms during the school year when we partner with, say, RIT. and we do those STEM camps. So it's a benefit over the summer and a benefit all school year round. And I think we did a pretty good job maintaining a pretty tight budget considering all that we gave. And the kids, the most important thing, the kids have really grown and really learned to a deeper level what that means in their life to participate in these activities.
Thank you. Superintendent Coleman?
That was a great presentation, and I know about all these things 'cause I hear about them, but when I saw Jonathan describe each of them all in one group, I just thought all the deaf schools in the country combined don't do that much for their kids. So Utah really is an example to others. For our superintendent report here, I just wanted to quickly, unless there are questions, are there any questions on that before I move on?
I'm not seeing any online, none here. Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Report.
For the superintendent report, I just wanted to mention that school is now underway. It's open. It's great to see students and teachers and others populating our campuses again. We are finding with the growth that we anticipated, we've only scratched the surface because as we've been explaining, it happens all through the year. But we're already seeing areas that we're going to need to address in our upcoming plan development of our long-term sustainability plan, or whatever we're going to call it. We still have not heard from the groups that supposedly completed their studies and delivered draft studies to DFCM, but USDB hasn't received copies yet, I should say. So we have heard from them. We haven't seen anything, and we hope that will happen during September. After that whole process, it'll be a good exercise, and I think it'll be a good time for the board to convene a task force that sits down and says, now that we have this information, now that we've seen the growth trends, where do we want to go in the future, and how do we plan for it? And that's something that something that USDB can't just do on its own. And so I just wanted to kind of put that in the back of your mind, that in the next several months, probably we should talk about really having a concerted, deliberate effort to look at the future. With that, I will allow the two associate superintendents, if they want to share anything for the remainder of the superintendent report today, and that's all we have for you.
I don't think we have anything. I will just make you aware that you received a memo of a calendar of future events, and I wanted to just make you aware of White Cane Day on October 5th, which will be at HEHA's. That's a great time to be able to meet families from all over the state with the students with vision loss.
Okay, Board Member Wood, do you have okay.
Superintendent Coleman, I just have a quick question that I had a thought on when you talked about your buildings. We approved your recommendation for legislative, but we know when those buildings come back that the money that's been set aside is not going to be sufficient. Are you thinking this is going to be another year away before we'll have to request some new funds to do that building? What's your timing on that? Yeah,
because with the timeline, we're required to really start our legislative requests before May this year was the first submission we had to have of our draft for requirements. It's September, and we haven't even had a chance to read through these reports, and supposedly they're several hundred pages long. After that, we need to regroup with the board and talk about where to go. And so I just don't see any way that prior to this legislative session, we'd be able to make a request to use that money or supplement it with additional funds. And we're kind of going to have to start at square one. It's dragged out long enough now that I think it'll be the FY or the 2026 legislative session. And it'll be a full year effort, I think, next year. We'd like to include everything, even talking about the 3% rule and how we fund the students that we serve all throughout the state where we see so much growth. I just think all of that's fair game as the board kind of takes USDB apart and looks at every facet, and we put it back together in the way that serves the families and the kids the best throughout the state.
Okay, additional question?
No, I just, thank you. That is helpful as we are going to, as I've looked at the frustrations the delay has put in with your growth, but also just looking at how you're funded so much differently from, but I mean, your mission is different also than some of our traditional schools. So we thank you for the work you're doing.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really 3 years now since we requested the buildings and had the money set aside. But if you look for a silver lining, it is that we've seen trends since then that we could not have anticipated, and so we just got to start all over once these reports come in and see where we go from there. Thanks for the question. That was a very good, important question to talk about, I think.
Thank you. Do you have any other items? Nope. Okay. Superintendent
Thank
Coleman,
you.
are you guys done today? All right. Thank you for
We're done.
attending.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remind me, do we have to close this meeting and start a new one? Okay. I will take a motion to end our, well, we don't have to? Oh, okay. All right. All right. We don't have to close and restart. Okay. All right. We are going to, so we're going to, let me pull up our agenda. So we're carrying over unfinished business. And first on our unfinished business is the general session legislative preparation, and specifically the request for board support on draft legislation funding request for the 2025 general session. People may want to be thinking about possible options and moving forward on this, meaning that we have, I think, 9 board members, and so there's a variety of ways we can do this, but I'll kind of leave it to the body. I have some suggestions too, but I'll see what the body has, how they want to proceed. Superintendent Jones, do you need to present anything? Or are we just ready to start letting people? Okay, and at about 2 o'clock, we're going to take a break for just a couple minutes to let our student advisory group, because they have a meeting today. We're just going to interrupt our meeting for just a few minutes and let them introduce themselves, and then we'll continue our business. So we're going to give them an opportunity to just contribute for a minute, or at least to see what we're doing. Okay.
Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. We're excited about this process. We're quickly coming upon the deadline in October to meet the law for the Budgetary Procedures Act, in which the board is required to submit proposals for your budget, basically what amounts to new money, to the governor's office, and then we move together into the legislative session with your request. So we feel, or I'll speak for myself, I feel strongly that we've given or provided the information. You have the requests for appropriation forms, the data that's necessary. We've got a great tracker here that's displayed in front of you. So at your direction, Madam Chair, we're ready as staff to support the board in your process of identifying your requests for new funding in accordance with the Budgetary Procedures Act and going into the next legislative session.
Okay. Okay. So, there's a couple ways we can proceed. We can have people make motions and just say, I move X, Y, and Z. We can go down each one and just take a vote on it, which that's what I'm kind of leaning for. And so let me just maybe frame this up again. Tell me if I'm wrong in any way. What will happen is we move these forward. If a majority moves them forward, they would go into a Qualtrics kind of survey thing, and then board members would prioritize what their top priorities are. And then we could also have a motion on, we move the top 5 forward, we move the top 6. The others would be listed, but we would say that these are, whatever, these are the top motions that we're trying to move forward. And anyway, so that's another way we can do that. One other item, well, let's just go. We do have to, leadership is meeting with the governor's office on the end of September, and it would be great if we had just an overall view of the direction we're headed, other departments will have their budget ready to say, this is the direction we're headed on those. We won't have ours finalized until October, but to have a general feel of what the, what priorities we're looking at would be beneficial for the board, instead of just saying, here's 30 things and we're not sure where we're at yet. It'll give us some indication if we can kind of narrow those down. So, Board Member Straight, I see that you've got your light on. Do you have a comment? Or do you have a...
I'd like to make a motion, then I'd like to discuss that after I make the motion.
Okay.
I move that we forward items 1 through 15 on the legislative priorities to be ranked by the entire board.
Is there a second? Okay, Board Member Carey seconded that. And will you speak to your motion?
Yes. I think with our numbers, I've looked through each one of these. I understand. I don't see any of them that I wouldn't want to move forward. I do have on number 2, the CTE one. It lists it by options. My suggestion is we not identify a particular option in this case, but because I don't want to handicap the concept. There's also on number 15, which is the last one. I know there's been lots of discussion around this one. I want to move this one forward too, because I think it'll give us time to get more information and conjugate where we're headed in regards to that. So I know there's a couple areas, number 2 and number 15, that may have some concerns of some, but I think the prioritization of these will speak for itself. I would hate to have anything removed because of our numbers, of our number of board members available to vote right now. I would hate to see 3 votes torpedoed, because you have to get to 8. So my suggestion is that these all have value. Will really determine what we move forward. It'll give leadership direction when we get on and rank those. They'll see where the rankings were. Then the first meeting in October, we look at it again, and we determine where everything falls out from there. So one other consideration, and then I'll end. We have a shortened amount of time. If we went through each one, there really wouldn't be much time to discuss in detail and give the due diligence to each one of those items as they should receive before we took a vote. So that would be my suggestion, and yeah.
Okay. Others, Board Member Wood.
Just a question on that. If we were to move forward with this motion, could we put a timeline on there such that you would have something to discuss as you head to as leadership heads to their meeting, that we're in a currently ranking process, but so far we gave them a deadline. We're at the 6th. You said the end of September. 15 days, 2 weeks. If you gave the board 2 weeks to rank, at least you would have something to discuss.
Well, we would have the outcomes of the survey, right? But we wouldn't have the board's final motion for it. So we could give indication of where people were leaning, but yes, that would be an accurate statement.
At least it would give you something to say this is where individual board members have prioritized.
Why they do that every year.
I have a clarification. Are there 16 items or 15 items on here?
I counted 15. I could be wrong.
Well, I'm just looking at 16 columns. I'm just making sure that we're...
Well, do we include USDB
It's
in our ranking?
It's at the bottom, though. We already voted on that.
That's separate.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at the Oh, okay. Okay, I just am trying to clarify there.
I counted a couple times, but I could miscount.
Okay, Board Member Davis, did you have comment, question?
That meeting should take place after our October board meetings. This happens every year. And I don't know why. First of all, the whole thing's messed up because we have to create a budget when we don't have exact revenues, and no household runs their financial operations like that. But that aside, and I understand the time constraints, even if, their budget is due in the middle of October or whatever, our board meets the first Thursday and Friday of the month. We should be able to take a board vote and then have that meeting happen. And I know it puts them in a really tight time frame, but maybe they need to push to have their time frame moved to November 1st or something. But the way this is done every year, it isn't right, because basically what it does is leave leadership to guess what the will of the board ultimately is going to be based on these conversations or these initial votes, but not a floor debate and official vote.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, first of all, we cannot send everything forward. And I'm worried. I understand that we'll be able to rank and then chop it off at 3 or 4. But by moving them all forward without having the discussion here, you are really compromising exactly what you're talking about, time to talk about them and debate them. Yes, it would be easy to send them all forward and rank them, but then there would be no discussion. The second point is, yes, our numbers are low. We do meet a quorum, and it's board member choice. They're grown-ups. If they don't show up, they don't show up. But our business has been noticed. The meeting is the same time it is every month. We can't keep kicking this can down the road without conversation about these. No matter if it's 5 of us here or 15 of us here. So I'm a little concerned that moving them all forward causes some problems down the road. I also am concerned that people aren't really looking at these and saying, these two are critical. They are all wonderful cases. They're all wonderful ideas. They're all good. But we know the limitations, and we have been expressly told to limit our requests. So, this has not gone well when we put forward a laundry list. And I just want to make sure that everybody, whether you're in this meeting or you're watching this meeting later to get caught up, that's something that board members think about in the next month. If we do, no, they told us when the meeting is, period, end of story. We can have a special meeting if we need to have that voted on, but I'm not going to be the one that calls the governor's GOPB and says, please move your meeting.
I'll call.
I mean, I understand that. I understand that.
Why continue wrong?
We do have other options, is what I'm saying, if that is a necessary step. I would prefer just to do the process as we planned and move it forward. I understand the problem of not having that floor vote. So if we needed to do that before the meeting, then we would need to do that on our part. Just my thoughts.
Board Member Straight, we'll take one more comment, then we're going to let our youth do the interruption, and then we'll continue. So go ahead.
So, point of information, then a comment. So what is the number that we have been given? Because in the past, we've always had, last year we did 11, wasn't it? Or 12 top. And then the others were just listed below. Are you saying that number is reduced? and we're not going to have any listed below? What's the format of what we're looking at in regards to?
Yeah, more or less, it was, they wanted to know if, for example, if we know that there's going to be limited funds, it's less than last year. I'm just saying, and so when we put on there, our, let's say our number one is the WPU, and the increase exceeds what the expectation is for the increase overall, they're like, and then we have listed underneath them another 10 items. They're asking, what's your priorities? Is it only the WPU? And when we have 10 other items listed there, do we go each one down, or do you want to give us 4 or 5? The last couple of years, yeah, we've had a large list of things. Prior to that, that wasn't the case. It was more narrowly tailored. So, anyways, it's up to this body, though. This body makes that decision. If you want to do that, then you can. I'm not saying we can't, but I just think we need to be maybe some thoughtfulness about that. But go ahead, Brent.
I just want to understand where we're headed with this, so that because if we're just going to list 6, I want to know that. However, for example, in my mind, and I've looked it over, and I've read the differences between, on the second one, career and technical education program, there's a long discussion in that, because there's 3 options. And, I have questions. I think to give a fair amount of discussion, I think that would require more than 8 minutes, because if you take 15 and you give 8 minutes per 15 of each one of these 15, you are at 2 hours. If you want to take 20 minutes, you're now at 5 hours, and based on my observation of this body, that probably would be about right on what it takes to actually vet these as they should be. However, if you take the vote, at least you get a ranked vote of all the board members who participate, and it does give us a ranking. And when you go up and see the governor, you have this ranking, and that ranking could then change. It may change 2 months after that as well. There's always adjustments. So
this is before the body. We do have a motion. So, and
Anyway.
we can, what I'm saying is we can argue this motion, the body can decide. We're just sharing some of the feedback that we've had. So, okay.
I have a question.
Okay, can we hold on? Is that okay to hold on? Will you guys leave your microphones on, and will you put a list on, and is that okay if we're gonna do an interruption real quick here. Elise Nui, who's doing the? Christina, did you have your? Okay, we are, but we're just trying to get a. All right, are we ready for the break, or? Yeah, yes, bring them up. Do you want to, if you want to turn one of the microphones on, and as they're coming up, they can introduce themselves, tell where they're from, and anyways, go ahead, yes.
Okay. I'm McKenna Welker. I'm from Voting District 1, and I go to Ridgeline High School.
Thank you.
I'm Malia Meekum, and I'm from Huntington, and I go to Emory High School.
Hi, I'm Carly Arnold. I go to Weber High School.
I'm Lily Teclemetin. I'm from District 4, and I go to West High, just 5 minutes away.
Hello, my name is Emma Cruz, and I go to Riverton High in District 9.
Thank you.
My name is Maya Vandenberg. I think I'm from District 7. I don't remember, sorry. But I go to Corner Canyon High School.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Zach Davis. I'm a junior at Sam Hills High School, which I believe is District 13.
Thank you.
And I'll share with the board members. So today is their first day here at the Utah State Board of Education. So they're going to be working with your staff to get kind of an overview of what happens here at the state board. And we're actually starting off with a bang today where these representatives from across the state will actually be starting a conversation to give input on some pending legislation that was recently announced in a press conference related to cell phone policies in schools. So the goal of having these students here is that they have that opportunity to be able to engage in some of the similar policy conversations, learn about what happens here at the State Board of Education, and really bring that student voice forward related to some of the topics that the board is discussing. And if appropriate, they would have an opportunity to bring those to you for your consideration as well.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Oh, yes, come, are you one right here? Let's grab a picture if you want to come stand
And,
right here.
and I'd like to add a comment,
I
if you
do,
don't
yeah.
mind. So thank you for taking time out of what I know to be very busy schedules. As a board member and as a member of leadership, it would be fabulous if you take a look at the agenda. I'm sure that you're sending it to them, right? Elise sends it to them. Take a look at that agenda, and if you have thoughts on any of the items, please forward them to the board. We love constituent feedback, and we definitely love feedback from our advisory groups. So take a look at that agenda. We'd love your thoughts, no matter how small, big, what seems far-fetched, or even critical. That feedback is important. Thank you for serving.
And we have Elena Addy, who is also online, and she'll be doing the advisory part today online. So can we get her to pull up? Oh, she was? Okay.
Oh,
There she is. Do you want to tell us what high school you're from? I don't know if you can unmute.
Hi, I'm Elena Addy. I'm from Northridge High School in Layton.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We're so grateful. Yeah, don't you love technology? You can be here and there and all over at one point, right? So thank you all for coming today. We do have a couple more comments. Board Member Davis, did you have a question or comment?
Just quickly, if I would have known that you all had snuck in the back there, I would have been a little less prickly in my comments earlier. So we can get a little prickly in our debates, but I would hope we're all friends and we all eat lunch afterwards, and it's all good. But I did want to just piggyback on what Vice Chair Hart said, to give your feedback, and we appreciate it. In fact, in my committee meeting this morning, I said, in our last Student Advisory Council meeting, our students gave this feedback on the financial literacy class and these things about tax forms that need to be included. And so we really do value your input. You are like the ultimate boots on the ground, and we would really love to hear your ideas as we move forward through the year. Thanks.
Okay. Well, and I was going to say just one closing thing. As important it is to hear your ideas, it's also important to understand the structure of how governments work, right? And I think grateful for Elise that and others that helped to provide that, because I think that's an important representative form, and we're elected as board members, not just appointed. And so there is that key governmental feature where we have constituents that we have to be accountable to. So, and you guys get to be appointed, but we're hoping that you can exercise your voice in reaching out to others that are your age, so that it becomes kind of a constituency and not just an appointee type of a thing. So anyways, thank you. So, all right. Okay. Okay, so we'll just restate where we're at. There's a motion on the floor. The motion is, do we have a motion document, just so that as people are speaking, we can speak to this? Okay. In essence, the motion was to bring forward the 15 items and all 15 items, and then to rank those. That's a simplified version of that.
No, that's good.
Was that the motion? So just letting people know as we're speaking to that. And that's, so whatever the body decides to do is the direction we'll head, so. I have Carrie. I had you, just made it a list, so go ahead.
I just had a question about the list. Is that speaking to the motion, or is that better, so one of the items was for the school safety funding, and there was a dollar amount attached. I believe it was $100 million. I just want to know, where did that particular figure come from? Was that just submitted in the board member who applied, or?
So, Sarah, do you have an answer to that?
I do. So in the full funding request, we reflected where that estimate came from. Components of that are related to the existing LEA submissions related to school safety grants. And then we use those submissions as well to project what we believe future asks are going to be, noting that not every LEA had completed that process. So our calculations are included in the full funding request, but I'm happy to bring them up and have staff speak to them if that would be helpful.
No, when that estimate was Chair, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So as long as Chantel and Deputy Superintendent Norman signed off on that figure, it strikes me as on the lower end of what I've heard being discussed. But I know it's not an exact science, but that was my only question. Thank you.
Can I maybe share something with the I guess I have the mic. From my understanding, it was and this is limited in scope, but just from reading through the documents that were provided and other discussion when it came up, is that it had, that districts said we still need this much funding to finish out what has been already asked. And so that was kind of a rough estimation of the compilation, which kind of was what was articulated. So I don't know if that added clarity or more confusion, but. Okay, Board Member Bogus, I had you next in line.
Yeah, I'm not clear on whether or not Member Straight's motion had a second, but I'd like to make a substitute
It did,
motion.
it was, yeah. Go ahead.
I would just make a substitute motion.
Okay, that's in order.
I would love to move the BTS in isolation at this time forward. Move it forward to the next step.
So
I don't know, maybe I didn't
okay,
articulate that.
let me just rephrase, and then you can, maybe this will clarify, because I don't think that's necessary. So his motion is that the board approves all prepared funding requests and directs staff to provide the funding request to board members for ranking before the board's October meeting, which would include BTS.
Yeah, so I have a couple options. I can move to divide, which I think is just gonna waste time, or I can move.
Sorry, I
these
misunderstood
others.
I apologize. Tell me one more.
I wanna just begin the process by moving the BTS forward.
You just want to move BTS?
Yep.
Okay. All right, substitute motion, is there a second? Well, the substitute would be, that's, yeah, there wouldn't be the other items, it would be just that one. That would be the motion to substitute. But that's not what the motion is. The motion is, it would be, we're only voting on the one, but it would substitute the previous motion, which then I think we got to think about the consequences of that. We might want to divide it out versus that, because otherwise, yeah, can we vote on the other items if we've now substituted that in place of it? That's the only question I have.
Can I amend it?
Oh, there's not even a second.
Well, is there a second? And if so, you can speak.
Was there a second? No second. So I guess. Okay, so next person I have is Board Member Davis.
I just wanted to speak to the underlying motion. I'm honestly neither here or there. I mean, I'm going to vote for the motion, but, you know, I'd be okay if we wanted to have some discussion about some of these cases even prior, but, you know, for the last several years, we have ranked our priorities. We've had between 10 and 12 top priorities every year. And then underneath that list, we've had a handful of things that we support but that are not ranked. But that continues to change and grow throughout the whole legislative session because legislators bring cases forward and funding requests forward. And if we support those, then those get added to that list. And then I think there's an assumption that legislators are, understand if they want to know, well, what's our top priority, they go to our prioritized list. And so they do have an awareness of what our priority is. So I don't think there's a magical number in the sky where we say we have to move 3 things forward instead of top 10 or whatever. I think our top 3 are still our top 3, even if we have a top 10.
Okay. Board Member Hymas.
Thank you. Usually in our priorities, the WPU is listed among them, and the WPU is not listed in this 15. Is this, are we just assuming that the legislature is going to include that, and that's why it's not in this top 15 or in this list of 15? And then, regardless of if that's true or not, it begs the question: are there top priorities? Because WPU has been our #1 for years. And it continues to be my #1 priority. Yet it's not in this list. So again, it begs the question, what else is not in this list? And I know we've had months to look at this. And this happened last year as well. If we remember, the legislature was working on school safety and it wasn't in our top 10. And so I'm looking at this. I don't know if we're ready to say, yeah, this is the definitive 15 that we want to select our top priorities from. So with that in mind, in my mind, I'm not ready to support the motion that's on the floor here. Thank you.
The top motion right there, Board Member Straight's motion. There was a second. Are there other comments? Board Member Straight. Okay, is that okay? Well, I know, and then I just saw his light come on, so. Go ahead, Board Member Straight.
If I remember correctly, it was the October meeting where we would set our WPU, and I remember I made a motion that the WPU be #1, and in fact, it just be listed first, and then we ranked from there. That being said, and that aside, I am absolutely willing, but I'm not sure that today's the day, I am absolutely willing to take the time necessary to discuss and fully vet all 15 of these. Now, if we average 20 minutes a case, that is 5 hours. That is what it represents, and I think it would actually be longer than that. We put ourselves in this situation, and we've always done it, where either during the legislative session or during these meetings leading up to the ranking, we often are making quick decisions. I would love to take the time, but I don't think anyone here wants to take 5 hours today. I was simply trying to give respect to the process, that the voice of the board is heard in regards to these priorities. I think that's the #1 goal. I think everyone has that goal. But I think to do what really needs to be done is not today. If we want to have another meeting and we want to take and set aside 6 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours, necessary amount of time to fully vet these and discuss them as a board, that's fine. I'm willing to do that. I'm also willing to go with the motion I put forward. We can put some details there if you want to add what's going to happen with that ranking and how leadership is going to present it. We can do that if we want to get into some details, or we can just go with this, which is very broad. If we want to narrow it down, we can. Anyway, I think I've said enough, but I'm willing to do whatever this body wants to do, but I want to give respect to the priorities we have.
Okay, Board Member Carey, did you have a question?
Yeah, just 2 points of information. One regarding Board Member Bogus's motion. The motion was regarding the BTS. If that vote took place in the affirmative, Board Member Bogus said she wanted to move it forward. Like, what would be the practical effect of voting on that motion?
What would be the outcome of that?
Yeah, like, right. What?
Then it would just be part of our not prioritization. It would go out as one of the items that you can rank going into our next meeting. So that's all we're doing. We're moving the things forward so they can be ranked.
Okay. Would be unranked. And thank you. And then the second question is, if we don't, as a board, collectively take any action, either formally or informally, to rank these items, when board leadership meets with the governor's office, how is that presented if there's no?
We just say this is what happens. Is we say these are things that the board's interested in. This is the amount they're asking. There would not be any prioritization. Is that what you're asking?
If we did nothing else and board leadership went to that meeting, we would say, we have no prioritization and we have nothing to bring you. No, we have not voted on WPU.
Can
No.
someone
That
clarify
was
that?
last
That might,
year, I thought.
that may have been, if it was, can we find that motion? Do you understand? If that was taken in June, I don't remember. I'm just gonna be honest with you, I can't remember. Let's just make sure, and if it was, then we've got it ready to go. If not, then we need to be aware of that, for sure.
We will have no direction, so therefore we would have to tell them we have nothing to.
You don't even show them this list.
No, we would
No.
have
Well,
if we don't move anything forward.
If we do nothing else, then nothing has, if we don't vote this and we don't vote anything else, we have nothing to take them. If this passes, every member will be given a Qualtrics survey where you rank them. They will be statistically compiled.
Yeah.
And that's the list we would take. However, what we would have to say is, this is the prioritization. Unless we specify otherwise in a motion before we meet, we would have to say, we have not voted on this list in its full state. We could only say that this is how individual board members prioritize things. So that's a slight difference there. The other thing is, I recall a conversation with a legislator, and I don't remember if it was during a meeting or after a meeting. And the legislator said, and it was a PEA member, they said, what happens when you ask for a 7% WPU, but we can only fund 5? Does that mean that the board would like all the money to go to that? Or do you want, do you want it all to just be put there, or do you want to reconsider? And so, to me, what that signaled was they really did want specific. They didn't want to hear a laundry list, a Christmas list. They wanted to hear very directly what this board wanted. And to me, that's an opportunity and a responsibility. So I understand that we don't have enough time to do an in-depth on each issue, but we still have a responsibility, and I don't know if you're ever ready for those kinds of I think you have to look at what's presented, and you have to make a judgment call. And I think we need to be more specific. We've been asked to be more specific, and we can't say, well, we need to talk about this. We don't have the time to do that. Now, someone can make a motion that we have a meeting where we simply talk about it. You know, we could do a work session or whatever, but we can't rest on this. This process, we've known for a year how this process is gonna go. So we need to dive in and be a little bit fearless on it. And we also need to make hard decisions. And we're gonna have to say, you know what? We love program blah, blah, blah. We absolutely love it, but it's not in the top 3. And we're gonna, I just see a reluctance each year to not hurt the program's feel. Like it feels like we're afraid to say, you know what, this year we need to prioritize this. And I just encourage the board to be a little less, to be a little bit more fearless in this and really look at the priorities, even if you don't have all the details.
But we do have, and just with that, you do have a outlined summary that's in there. Send it out early to just ask for you to be very thoughtful about that and to get some questions asked if you have that. But in the end, it is the body. This is a board. This is the body. Whatever you guys want to do. If we want to do another meeting, if we want to discuss it for 5 hours, I kind of prioritize my own. But do you know what I mean? So we can do all this. We can move this forward, and then you can ask us based on the survey. We would take it all, right? And then we'll prioritize next month. So whatever you want to do. Leanne, I'm going to go to you just because you haven't responded yet. Oh, and Sarah's on. Okay, go ahead.
I would like to amend the motion.
Okay.
Behind all prepared funding minus the school behavior support for K-12.
Okay.
And I can speak to that.
Okay, is there a second for that? Okay, there's a second for that.
So I was told that finance approved extra funding from the carryover this morning, so it will be coming to the board, but staff has found a way to fund that internally with our carryover, and so that can move forward, and we would not need to prioritize that as a funding request for our legislature.
Okay, are there additional comments to that amendment?
I have a question.
Yes.
Which I was just about to ask, actually. Did that get solidified, and should that be part of this motion that we say, instead of asking the legislature, we prioritize carry forward funds from our budget to pay for this?
I did wonder if I have to wait till
top
October.
requests from the field right now.
I think because you did it in committee and it would come before the board, that I think just removing it is what needs to happen. So.
But then you're risking it not passing the full board. So you're saying parliamentary-wise, it cannot be included in this motion?
I don't know. I just know that it will be before the board again in October. Am I accurate in saying that? It passed out of committee. It's going to, regardless, it'll be before the board again in October.
But is it legal to do it right now, so we know? Is it legal to do it right
now?
So
there's a motion that was passed in committee. What's wanting to happen is to join that motion with an action here. But it'll still come before the board in committee, before the full board, so.
Right, but I want to know, is it legal right now for her motion to say, I'd like to remove this from this list and instead fund it through carry forward funds? And have us approve it right now?
No, but that's what I'm saying. It still would come before the board.
But it's also not, let's forget about the committee. Let's say it's just on this list. Is it okay for her to say, I want to take it off of this and pay for it through board funds?
Oh, is it noticed?
Yes, it's noticed on the list. It's right here on the.
So it doesn't have to say carry forward funds?
Okay, we're going to let Michelle and, Michelle, does that make sense, what we're asking?
Can you?
Okay, but the question, and we could amend it, add that to it, but then it could also, does the motion, this motion still comes before the body in October.
We don't want to wait till October because we want to know if we should take it off or not right now. It's not going to get funded, we don't want to take it off.
They want to be sure to. Can you take a committee motion that's been made?
Okay, let's forget about the committee. Forget about the committee. It's on the list. It was added as a board member.
Yes.
Can she today say, I'd move to remove this from this list and pay for it through carry forward funds or through board discretion funds, wherever we're getting it. Exactly.
Okay. So but when the motion comes before, and I guess my question is, when the motion comes before the body in October, it won't come before the body now?
Right, doesn't need to be.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to make sure we do that correctly. Because it's a two-part motion. It's not just remove it, it's remove it and now take the action that was in committee today.
Somebody can move to divide.
Okay? It would need to be amendment. So what did we decide? Can that happen? Michelle, is that what you're, okay? No, it would.
It's in the list. We're forgetting about the committee.
It happens to be the same, but it's separate.
It happens to be the same, but it was here prior.
So what happens if it doesn't pass in October? I guess I'm just thinking of that in my mind. So we could say yes to it now, but then it could take a risk in October because it would come from the committee because it was passed in the committee. We're not substituting what took place in the committee.
Any of these can be undone in
So
October.
I just want to make sure. Okay, well, go ahead.
I do have
Oh,
a
go
point of
ahead.
information. This item with the priorities, has that been listed as an action item or discussion item?
Action item from yesterday.
Okay, it has been listed and noticed as an action item? Okay, thank you.
Okay. What would you like your amendment to be?
It looks like that Deputy Stallings doing a great job. So
Okay.
I move to amend the motion to add accept the school behavior support for K through 12 funding request after requests and add the following at the end and approve the student support carry forward funding request for school behavior support for K through 12.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Board Member Davis, are you?
No, I just don't know if the wording needs to be approved, the request, because you're referring back to the committee, and then there could be an agenda issue. I mean, I just am saying, you just say, and approve the student support carry forward funding to pay for the school behavior support for K-12.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see, is there anyone online with a hand? Member Real, are you online to discuss this amendment?
No, I have another one after
Okay,
this
we'll
one's
put
done.
you in line here for another. Okay, Brent Straight, are you?
Yeah, just by way of information, when we first did the teacher preparation hours years back, that actually wasn't in our top 10. It was actually added in the October meeting, and it was just put on the list, and a legislator picked it up. And so that's
Are you
the case
speaking
with
to
all
the
of
amendment?
this. Well, yes, I am.
Oh, you are,
because
okay.
I'm just trying to point out that these are dynamic. For example, if Board Member Green were here today, I think it would be super appropriate if she said, well, my opinion would be on her which is CTE, that we do option 2 or we do option 3, and it would still apply and could be attached to the motion that I have here. So I very much appreciate what's been done with this amendment, and I think it's highly appropriate. But since Board Member Green is not here, I don't want to pigeonhole her idea. But I'm also saying that everything is dynamic. The legislature, in the end, decides what is important to them, and there are lots of factors moving in from the public, from us, from other groups, who can change the direction of a policy, or in their case, we have policy, but they would have their laws. those can drift and those can change drastically, and what doesn't get any traction this year
Okay.
may get traction next year. So I've
I
said
just
enough.
make
but
sure we're on the
yeah.
amendment, so,
And,
okay.
and I think it's applicable, so thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, any other comments? Okay, the motion before the body is that,
Oh, I did.
who's,
Sorry, you
oh,
can't
sorry.
see my, cause
Yeah, I can't.
and I should go back to my table, cause.
Yeah, I know, because you look
I'm
like
Randy
Randy
now.
Booth from here.
I thought
I keep
I
looking
sat in
down
the
going,
wrong
who is that?
chair. I'll switch back.
You're good. It is,
Well,
all right.
Are we speaking to this motion now?
It's to the amendment.
To the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, I'll quickly, and you didn't speak to it yet, so I don't know if you're going to speak to it. But I was just gonna say, there's been a lot of conversation surrounding this very request for funding, and one of the top things those in the field keep asking for are more behavior supports, or adults in the building who have some behavior support training. And we did something similar to this a while back, but with special education funds. And we had a massive, I think over 1,000 people participated, if I'm remembering right, with Dr. Voorhees in our trainings. And so this is kind of modeled in a similar fashion, but because it would involve paraeducators or aides that are working, or teachers even, whoever wants to participate in this, one per building, because it would involve general ed and special ed, it would need to come from different funds. It wouldn't necessarily be able to come from special ed funds, but the model has been wildly successful, and I think it would be really good to support our schools in this way.
Okay, I do have a question, and Leanna, I'm sorry we didn't give you, Board Member Wood, time to speak to it. If you need to, you can. I just have one question, though.
Member Davis did a great job.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I've looked down the rationale. I just don't know what this is. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's broad language. I don't know what's the program, right? So I don't know if you can speak to that, or maybe it was highlighted today in the committee, but.
Can I speak to it?
Yes, please.
So what we're looking at is that there will be a training designed. So it's a kind of like a 3-year program where the first year the training is designed by our staff. And they have the capacity, they've told me they have the capacity and the desire to do this. Once the training is created, then it will be offered, and the number will be about 1 per school in Utah. And what happens, a district will have that option to, if they have a significant issue in a certain school, maybe they send 2 or 3 from that school. So it's a numbers game, not a school by school game. But then we will have at least 1 per train, so about 1,200 trained paraeducators. Given that, if it works well, maybe we could continue that on as we go forward. But this was a request that came through me after I toured a school in my city where they had their grade leadership from each grade came. I was with a legislator, and they said, give us 1 thank you and 1 ask. And over, they said, we need help with behavior. We need help with behavior. And so I had that legislator is kind of on watch, where if we needed to do this through the legislation, she was willing to help me, but our staff was able to find ways to fund that. And that, what I love about that is we can move forward on it immediately if this goes forward, as opposed to having to wait.
Okay. The motion before the board is that the board amend there we go. Let me see. Okay. Amend the motion to add except or A, should that be except? The school okay, I'm just gonna read it the way it is. Accept the school behavior support for K-12 funding request after request, and add the following at the end of the motion, and approve the student support carry forward funding to pay for the school behavior support for K-12. Any questions to that motion? Okay, we're gonna vote. All right, let me find my, okay, we're gonna start at the bottom. We're gonna go with Board Member Wood.
Yes.
Straight. Yes. Rill.
Yes.
Norton. Yes. Lear.
Yes.
Carey. Yes. Hymas.
Yes.
Hart?
Yes.
Earl is a yes. Davis?
Yes.
Bogus? No. Okay. All right, that passes. Do we have any more? Board Member Rill, you had a motion? No.
I
We're
do.
just-
I have an amendment.
Okay, what is your amendment?
I sent it to Angie, but my amendment is to change statewide student information system to just student information system. And the purpose statement would be, I have it simplified, that I sent Angie, but it is, after looking and being someone that was a big advocate for a statewide information system, knowing now the contracts and the way that all of our LEAs are using their current, many of them are using their current systems, it would be a huge burden on them to go to a uniform system. So my idea is to find a way to have comprehensive reporting and resources, like a reporting plan, resources for LEAs that do not have the ability to have a good student information system, and then as well a potential FTE to manage the statewide SIS data and reporting.
Okay.
So it's similar, but it's not the full.
Let me read what we have here.
Statewide information system, but a little bit more flexible and better for our LEAs.
Okay, let me read it out and you tell me if this is what you want, and then we'll see if you have a second. The motion would be that the board directs staff to revise the statewide student information system funding request to student information system and amend the purpose statement to be funds to create a uniform reporting system, resources for LAs without a sustainable SIS system, and potential FTE for statewide SIS data and reporting support. Is that what you want?
That is correct. That's what I sent to
Okay,
Angie.
is there a second for that? Second. Okay, second. Board Member Norton seconded that. Is there discussion? Anybody online? Okay, we will take, yep, go ahead. Board Member Norton.
I had not seen this before, but I had something similar to this in mind. I don't know that system is the most perfect word. I think what we really need is and I'm not suggesting to change this, but I think what we need to do is maybe quit thinking about systems and start thinking about a standard. We need to have our school information brought in and sent out and relayed and at a standard that meets the needs for USBE and for financial reporting, so that that we're getting clean data and that it can come in and go out to all the systems. And I think we saw this morning from our NES report that when we get our superintendents, our staff, the right people together, they can find a way. And that's what I keep thinking, that there should be a hybrid way that we can keep these LEAs from just absolutely having traumatic problems by having to change over their system, and with probably, who knows what's going to happen with the funding on this. But if we could get these people together and maybe put a little pressure of, we've got, an entire state full of LEAs that need the vendors to also step up to the plate and give us a system, and it might be a hybrid system. I mean, it might be that, these major groups can keep their current operating system, but those vendors have, or within in-house, or somebody brings something in, and I don't know if that's possible, but I think that we need to look at that as an option so that we can keep our information clean, our data pure, and that we all operate at a great system level. But it might be different people. Yes.
What if I really like what you said about standard. So I would feel good about changing funds to create a uniform reporting standard.
Or do you
It
have
is kind of
still
similar.
a second with that?
I don't know if that works with
It meaning like everyone, when they send their data to the state, it has to be uniform. It comes in the same format, the same way with all the same fields. And that makes it a lot easier for our system to then, and we develop that standard so that we require all the LEAs with their different SIS systems to send their data in the same reporting standard.
Okay. Board member, Scott Jones, do you have a comment?
Well, I just want to, and hopefully this is for the good of the group and the good of this discussion. The data standards are available. What is happening in a lot of instances is that the current systems that are being used, in order to meet the standards for submission of that data, they have to take additional time and effort to export from their own system, reconfigure it to submit to us. The concept behind one SIS is, well, if you're all in one, so not even a student information system, say a financial system or one system, right? A one system approach means everybody's doing it in the one system to the same standard. What ends up happening is research supports that when you have to export data, when you have to download it, the training curve, those types of things, your risk of increased errors in those submissions occur. And we've seen that. We've seen that through the years. We've seen that, over time. So I concur with Board Member Norton in the sense of, well, systems need to be aligned so that we reduce or, well, actually, hopefully eliminate the risk that by way of export and all these types of things that we're seeing, errors that come up to us that have to be redone. If you want to use Kaizen, Lean Six Sigma, the rework is incredible on all this. And it's no one's fault. It's not, there's different levels of training and understanding. You have different systems, so you get different training for different systems. You do that. I'm not criticizing that in any way, but I just want to make sure that I think we're pretty good and pretty clear about what the data standards are for reporting, what's required. We don't require anything above what's required by law, but inevitably what ends up happening is we get a jumble of information because, again, nobody's fault, not disparaging any types of systems. We just operate in different disparate systems. So you get exporting, downloading, reconfiguring, reformatting, chips up, long-term quality control reviews of over 600,000 students and their data. And the concept behind one SIS is that really oftentimes solves a lot of those problems. So thank you. I'm not trying to.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not practicing to be a lobbyist, but just clarity.
No.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I do.
Board Member
I totally understand what you're saying. 100%. I really do. I think that this allows us to get all of our ducks in a row, pressure and force.
We've lost you, Board Member Rill. Board Member Rill.
Inform reporting. Yeah.
We lost you.
Am I not there?
Oh,
okay.
Just about 30 seconds back.
Similar.
It was probably really good, but we don't know what it was. So
I totally agree with you, and I feel like this is an opportunity for us to get all of our ducks in the row and organize a standard for our reporting and force these systems and these contracts that our LEAs have with these systems to uniformly report the data. And it's similar to the USHI system. We use different SIS systems at different institutions, but the USHI requires us to report in a uniform way. And all of the systems that each institution works with has been forced to change their way of reporting and their way of collecting data to be aligned with how the state wants it to be reported. So this is an interim way of getting us all a little bit more uniform.
Okay. Let's see, who's next? Board Member Norton, you're done. Board Member Davis, did you have a comment?
I just noticed at the end there, she said an interim way of working through this, and it sounds to me like, well, she's saying they're either gonna fall in line or they're not gonna be able to be used. And so, you know, there's these two competing issues at hand. One is there's a lot of changes that would need to be made on one side, but on the other side is we have to have accurate information and data. So I don't know if that means we ultimately come up with an approved list of vendors, or if it's only gonna be the ones that can export in the way we need it done, or what's gonna happen. But I mean, it sounds like it's a reasonable start to a solution to the problem, but interim may be the key word, you know? It may be the key word.
Okay.
Maybe a reasonable start is a better way of saying it, Member Davis. And a lot of these big systems with the big contracts that our LEAs use, they use them for more than just the reporting data. And going in and changing the way they do that is a huge lift. And so, but the companies, software companies that create these SIS systems, they have the capabilities and the resources to adjust their SIS system to align with what kind of reporting we need.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this discussion, and it feels a little bit like Groundhog Day when we had this discussion in 2017, and we heard some of the same concerns about, you know, we've invested money, change is hard, we want systems to be able to talk to each other, we get it. So I appreciate those same fundamental concerns. I want to expand the frame a little bit because we heard commentary yesterday about reporting, and a lot of our conversation to this point today has been about reporting and data exchange. But let's broaden the frame to think about decision making, regardless of where we end up at the end, whether it's one system or systems that talk to each other. I'm reflecting on the number of audits that we've had that talk about efficiency of compliance monitoring and not being able to not just get correct data, but the efficiency around that. So those are some of the terms I'm thinking about in the framework. Efficiency, decision-making. States that have gone to one SIS you're starting to see the needle move on student outcomes, just based on the efficiency and effectiveness of data that they have accessible to them. We also haven't brought up one of the important talking points, and that's the parent and community engagement with systems. Can parents get the information they need? Can educators get the information they need? As we've looked at the systems in this state, now I know I'm saying this very publicly, so I'm going to be very careful in how I say this, but there are a lot of systems out there, and we're aware of maybe 2 that are really comprehensive in nature, that if you looked at it in a microcosm, they can do all of the things around efficient compliance monitoring, all their systems connected, while protecting data, making sure that the right data is all connected and there for community engagement and parents, et cetera. So to say that I don't want to change, or we've invested money in systems, I think you have to weigh that with, I think it was Member Davis who was saying, there might be a lot of things that need to happen in all of these disparate systems that could be more expensive than one system. So I just, again, want to broaden the framework that it's not just about data and reporting, but there are all of these other elements, including transparency with the community, efficiency, cost savings, compliance monitoring, and some of those kinds of things. You could start with minimal capabilities like you're talking about, but we have the standards in place. So how do we make sure all those other things are talking points in the framework as you move forward? That's my tripling down, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. The Board Member Norton, do you have another comment?
And I appreciate those comments very much. And because this is not a court where I have to win a case, I can argue the other side pretty well too, because as a teacher, I will tell you that one of the most frustrating years I ever taught school had to do with these systems, because we did not have, and we do not have, a system that transfers records within our state between LEAs. And I waited 4 very long months to get one student's file with their SPED records in it, and it was horrific. And I bet we called every single day. I could have walked to that school and back to Washington County faster than we got those reports. And we needed them. We needed the data. And so I get it, and I am wholeheartedly 100% in for education to make these transfers work. It's critical for student outcome. And I'm just all there. I also have been a teacher that has gone through that change of SIS systems and know what that feels like. And it never comes at the good time, and it's a big challenge and that's just on my little teacher side of the world, to have to start all over to learn the whole new system again. But I would just like us to be able to have a discussion like we're having here, where we understand each other better, and see if there's any way we can come out with a little bit of movement so that we get the information we need. It's where it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to be, and we don't have those problems. And if there's a way that we can even get, a couple of these legacy systems that are used by a wide number of students, and maybe have more than just the one option, but maybe 2 or 3 options that can do the work, that's at least another possibility. But I hear what you say, Superintendent, and you're right. Student outcome is what we're here for.
Board Member Davis.
Accurate student outcome.
May I ask a question of the motion maker?
Okay, question of the motion maker.
I'm wondering if that part at the end of the motion, it says, and potential FTE for statewide SIS data and reporting support. I mean, is that if we are going to require vendors to absolutely meet the needs that we have here as a state, do we need to have regular meetings with those vendors? Is that FTE for that person, the person who's going to do that? Is our staff going to do that? What kind of funds would that require?
It is a huge lift to do all of this, whether it be a statewide SIS system or this consistent and uniform reporting. And I mean, I would love an assessment of all the SIS systems and looking at how each of them currently can report, and going through all. I mean, I just think that this is a huge undertaking. Either way we go, and I think another FTE is essential in order to complete that work and not burden our staff. But to answer your question, yes, I do think they would be working with these software companies as well.
Okay, I have a clarifying question. Just, did we change system to standard, or are we leaving it at system? And then was that seconded? I need that clarification, because we discussed it, but I don't know if that happened.
If I changed it, do we need a second, or can it be considered a friendly?
Well, we can ask if there's any objection. So did you want that changed?
I think that is a better description.
Okay, so the word would be changed from system to standard at the end. Is there any objection to that? Well, is there any objection?
Yes.
You object?
Yes.
Okay, so you'd actually have to make a motion for that to be changed then.
And I
Brent?
could,
Brent?
my suggestion is keep system and then put standards, student information system standards. Or is SIS too long? So you don't think that works?
Can I have just ask a question?
Yes, but you got to turn your mic on.
What is the marketplace? What do they call it? They all call them SIS systems. Are they systems? I think we ought to go with what is the common language.
Okay. Board Member Real, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did, and it's kind of both, because there is the potential for us to use these resources to adjust and change our system at USBE, but there is also this idea of a reporting standard. So it's kind of both, and I think I probably used system originally just to keep it more open, because I think that if we do ask for resources for this plan, then we're going to need to do an assessment and things. I think we're going to find that things might change a bit as we go through it, and that funding could be used for things that we could potentially not imagine at this moment.
Okay. Brent, do you have a question?
What would be appropriate to speak to right now? Because I'm not sure
we're
where
speaking to this amendment here.
Okay, so I can speak to that amendment. Okay.
Yep.
So we're past the systems and that discussion.
Well,
okay.
it didn't.
I'm glad. That's good. I just wanted to make sure I was speaking appropriately. Okay, so everyone here has listened to many voices in the last 3 days, from LEAs, from their leadership, lobbyists, and then staff, and then board members, and I'm hearing several messages. What I heard from the lobbyists was that we can make this work. If you give us a chance, we can interface with the systems. We can make this happen. So that's one voice. From the LEAs, we want to be responsible. We want autonomy. But we do understand the importance and need for the USBE to have good data, but do it through data sharing model and agreements to where we are required to meet certain standards. And I've heard other voices from LEAs that want the single system, and many of those are smaller districts. So I'm hearing many different voices. And it feels like when I was on a jury, and you're sitting there and you're listening to all these voices, and you're trying to, because you listen to 5 different lawyers and they're all arguing a different thing, and they all sound good. So anyway, I think I'm going to support this because I think it's one step forward. I don't think this is completely the answer. I think there'll be some revisions made, but we don't have to make all those decisions today. Let's make it as best we can. I like where we're at right here. I'm ready to move forward.
Okay. Any additional comments? Board Member Wood.
Just on the wording, it says funds to create a uniform reporting system resources. Is it a uniform reporting system, or is it resources? Or create?
There should be a comma after resource. The Oxford comma, maybe. Oh no, there's another one after that.
Oh, so system comma after system?
Create a uniform reporting system, comma, resources for LEAs without a sustainable SIS system, Oxford, comma, and potential FTE for statewide SIS data and reporting. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, the motion before the board is to amend, is an amendment to the original motion. It's to add the following, let's see, direct staff to revise the statewide student information system funding request to student information system and revise the purpose statement to funds to create a uniform reporting system, resources for LEAs without a sustainable SIS system, and potential FTE for statewide SIS data and reporting support. So let's start at, I don't know, we're going to start middle here. Board Member Lear.
Yes.
Oh, well, we'll start there more often. Board Member Norton. Yes. Board Member Rill.
Yes.
Board Member Straight.
Yes.
Board Member Wood.
Yes.
Board Member Bogus.
No.
Board Member Davis.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Board Member Hart.
Yes.
Board Member Hymas.
Yes.
Board Member Carey. No. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 yeses and 2 noes. The noes are bogus and carry. Are there any other motions? Okay, the motion before the board is that the board approves. Yes.
Chair, I have a point of information
Oh,
on this.
yes, go ahead.
This is the major motion, this is our
Yes,
underlying
this is
motion.
the main motion.
Yeah, I don't see Michelle, but I'm concerned that. Yeah, I see her now. Sorry, Scott. Yeah. But I'm fine. Yeah, Michelle, I'm concerned that, wait, what's our motion?
It's to move all the items forward with these 2 amendments to it.
But is this the one that says we're gonna vote on it?
We're
Like,
mov- We're moving all the items forward. What will happen is at this point of
Yeah.
information, right, is you will get an email over the next couple weeks where you would rank these, and then that would be compiled. And then it'd be brought before us in October, and then we can adjust that how we want to.
Yep. Yeah, and I seconded the
Okay.
motion, but now that I looked at the Open Public Meetings Act, I am concerned that we're saying that we're ranking, but really we're voting, right? We're expressing our preference as to which of these items is preferred. Like if we had this discussion in this body and we did the same thing, that would be a vote. My concern is that, are we violating the Open Public Meetings Act when we say, well, because we're doing it electronically and we're calling it a survey, it's not a vote? And I thought, well, we can get around that, we'll not get around it, but it doesn't apply because it's tentative. But then I saw that, well, tentative votes also are subject to OPMA. So,
Wouldn't we would have to disclose the.
I think as long as you disclose what your ranking is, you're okay.
and that disclosure doesn't need to be contemporaneous with the
I
actual
don't think
vote.
so. And I think on this where it's not a permanent vote, where it's your, that's a good question, sir.
Because, as I thought through this, I thought, well, okay, so we vote and then what?
Our
How long
ranking,
before we
your
have
ranking.
to? Well,
Yeah.
again, I think for purposes of the Open Public Meetings Act, I think it's the equivalent of a vote.
Yeah.
As I view it. But so, is there a requirement for us to disclose our ranking within because when we hold an open public meeting that's contemporaneous with the vote, whether it's final or tentative, here, it wouldn't be.
I think if you're not sharing with each other and you're independently by yourself doing your ranking and you're not sharing it and discussing it with each other, I think that makes a distinction as well, that you're not conversing with each other about your ranking. This is something you're doing independently and you're just sharing that with staff. It's not being you deliberating amongst yourselves about your ranking. That I feel like you're making your individual choices, that's not the same as you doing a vote because you're not collaborating as a group, making your decision as a group. You're not deliberating as a group. So that would
it will
vote
be
against
disclosed. It will be part of our agenda packet, so the public will have access to.
I understand, but it's
Okay.
not contemporaneous. Like, the public
I
has no
understand that.
ability to hold us accountable because it's not live. Like, the results are not. And remember, I seconded the motion.
Yeah, just making sure, and that's fine. It's good to ask these questions, so.
I'm not against it. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that we're.
In the past, we've seen it as being appropriate and not a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act where you weren't doing any conversing with each other about it. You weren't deliberating with each other about it. I understand that you see it as, it could possibly be seen as a tentative vote.
So if we came here as a body and we didn't discuss, we just voted.
Your ranking isn't a final decision at all.
So what I just read said it also applies to tentative, not
This
the
isn't
final.
I wouldn't even say that your ranking was a tentative decision because your vote by itself doesn't give the authority for the board or for staff to do anything by itself.
but they're gonna take that and they're going to go to the governor's office and
Right.
say, based
They're-
on this Qualtrics
They're going to
survey.
bring it to you, and you're going to see the Qualtrics survey.
And they're not gonna rely
So
on
then
that
we would
survey at
not,
all.
I think, I see where you're going.
Yeah.
Board Member Carey, because we wouldn't be able to actually bring the survey results there until they, yeah, that's
We-
a good point. Unless
we-
we had another meeting.
Well,
the
that's
only-
why we would say this is what is going to the next
But
meeting.
we wouldn't even be able to do that.
Why couldn't we say this is what's
For the very
going to
thing
the?
that Joe's saying is it would then come off as if it
So we would have to
position.
do a special meeting, because normally
I
we
do
would.
see that as a problem. I
Okay.
thought, it was my understanding that it was gonna come back to you as a board to make the
Well,
final
it
decision.
will. The idea was to show them where the results were, but the
But I
point
don't
is
think
it
you
would
can
have to
do
be
that
after.
without having the
Yeah.
board have
Actually
have been the
vote.
ones,
Yeah,
and
because it
without
would
you
look
being
as
the
if it
ones
were
that
a
make that
position.
decision.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I misunderstood. I thought it was going to come back to you first.
Well, it will, but it was just the tentative results, but it sounds like that can't happen, which
I don't
makes
think you
sense.
can disclose
Yep.
that.
Yep.
No, I don't think you can disclose
Yeah,
that
that's a
until
good
you as
point.
a board
Good question.
present it in an open meeting and make a decision in an open meeting.
Okay.
Again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not against the process.
Yeah.
I seconded the motion. I think it's a good motion. I just don't think we can do it.
I don't think you can do it without having the board come back together, whether you do it as a virtual meeting and you vote on it in a virtual meeting, however you're going to do it. But I think you as a board need to disclose those individual scores that you've made, the way that they collate together, and make a decision as a board.
So in other words,
agree.
if I can articulate, whatever we move today is just what we take there, saying these are provisions, we'll be ranking those officially in October. So okay, thank you.
Thank you for helping me understand, and I'm sorry that I didn't understand the whole process.
Board Member Davis, did you have a question?
I was just gonna say we should just call another meeting. I mean, like, I don't want
Someone
another
could
meeting
make
like I
that,
want a hole
someone
in my
could
head,
make
but
that motion.
I think
This
I
is the
move
motion
that we
on the-
call another meeting.
So is that a substitute motion?
No, it's an additional motion to all of this.
Okay, do we want to vote on this and then you can make that motion?
Sure.
Okay, so the motion before the board is that the board approves all prepared funding requests and directs staff to provide the funding request, except the school behavior support for K-12 funding request. A lot of funding requests there. To board members for ranking before the board's October meeting. 2, approves the student support carry forward funding to pay for the school behavior support for K-12 and directs staff to revise the statewide student information system funding request to student information system, or SIS, student information system, SIS, and revise the purpose statement to funds to create a uniform reporting system, resources for LEAs without a sustainable SIS system, and potential FTE for statewide SIS data and reporting support.
So,
Did I
Vice
get that
Chair
right?
Earl,
Yes.
I'd like to amend the motion.
Yes? What would your,
Under Part 1, for K through 12 funding request to board members for ranking before a special meeting called of the board.
okay. Or do you want that just part of?
It's just instead of before the board's October meeting, it's before a special meeting called of the board.
Motion to amend the motion to revise October meeting. So you're just adding a special, is it you adding the special meeting here?
Yes.
Is that what that's meaning?
Yes.
Okay, in a second? Second. Okay, any discussion?
Can I speak to it?
Yep.
I think I would like us to go forward with our, what do you call it, ranking, and then meet and evaluate so that when you go to talk to the governor's office, you have a specific vote from the board of our priorities.
Okay. Sounds like a good plan to me. Yeah, any other comments? Any comments online? Sarah, Board Member Rill, do you have a comment?
I don't, sorry, my hand's probably still up.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and vote. So the amendment is that to amend the motion to revise the board's October meeting to a special meeting of the board. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Oh, I see, because we had, I see, so you're striking, okay. You're just striking October meeting. That's why I was like, wait a minute, where do we have that? Okay, so the motion before, that's the motion before the board. Member Lear, we're going to start with you again. Point of information first.
All right, so we're not replacing the October meeting. We're having a special meeting before.
The number one, the end of number one. So it wouldn't be, it's replacing those.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Board Member Lear.
Yes, thank you.
On the amendment, Board Member Norton.
Yes.
Rill. Board Member Rill.
Yes.
Board Member Straight.
Yes.
Board Member Wood.
Yes.
Board Member Bogus.
Yes.
Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Board Member Earls, a yes. Board Member Hart.
Yes.
Board Member Hymas.
Yes.
Board Member Carey. Yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. And we're back to the original motion as amended. The motion is that the board approves all prepared funding requests and directs staff to provide the funding request except the school behavior support for K-12 funding request to board members for ranking before a special meeting of the board. Do I need to put special, sorry, okay, we did it, all right. Approves the student support carry forward funding to pay for this school behavior support for K-12 and directs staff to revise the statewide student information system funding request to student information system and revise the purpose statement to funds to create a uniform reporting system, resources for LEAs without a sustainable SAS system and potential FTE for statewide SAS data and reporting system. And we're gonna start with Board Member Hart. Okay, yes, was that a yes? Board Member Hymas.
No.
Board Member Carey. Yes. Board Member Lear.
Yes.
Board Member Norton.
Yes.
Board Member Rill.
Yes.
Board Member Straight.
Yes.
Board Member Wood.
Yes.
Board Member Bogus.
No.
Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Board, and I'm a no. Okay, and that passes. The no's are Bogus, Earl, and Hymas, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in favor. Okay, and we are moving to the next agenda item. Actually, we're going to move to our audit piece here. So we will turn the time over to Chief Audit Executive Debbie Davis and Deputy Audit Executive Kevin John. Do we need a break? Can we take just a 5-minute stretch? Okay, so 5-minute stretch if everybody wants to be quick, though I am pretty good about time. I can watch time a little better than Chair Moss, so just warning you. To get started. Thank you for keeping me on track here. Yep. Okay. Yes, Debbie Davis, do you want to go ahead and get started for us? Yes. We're ready. Okay.
Okay, thank you, board members, for the opportunity to present. I'm Debbie Davis, the Chief Audit Executive for the board, and Kevin John is, I think, passing around some data sheets. He's the Deputy Audit Executive. Our titles are a bit of a mouthful, so we're just going to go with Debbie and Kevin. We'll do that. First, this presentation, it is not a presentation about how to better understand audit reports. It's not an explanation of audit report elements. If you want to talk about that, we would love to talk to you about that at a different time. So what is this presentation about? There are resources, of course, in the board's packet, and we hope that you'll use those, you'll reference those, we will reference those during the presentation. And this is about the audit landscape, the audit themes and trends, particularly over about the last 5 years. This week, my car actually had a problem, and my best friend came and picked me up. And as we were driving home, she was telling me about a new leadership opportunity she has in the PTA at her school. And she said, I'm learning, there's some challenges, but she said, my motto is know better, do better. And I love that because I think that is the point of audits. So we can know a little bit more, so we can do a little bit better. We can continually improve.
All right. So when I was working on my bachelor's degree, I actually worked as a landscaper. One of my primary roles and responsibilities as a landscaper was to design and create characteristics within the landscape that were notable, right? That would set themselves apart. Think patios, waterfalls, ponds, gardens, flower beds, things of that nature. So when we talk about audit landscape, what are we talking about? We're talking about the exact same concept. We want to talk about things, characteristic traits that have been identified to distinguish themselves within the larger public education system. So we have spent the hefty amount of time to go through the last 5 years of audits to comprehend and consolidate that information so that we can provide that to you. But above all, right, the purpose of audits is to draw attention to specific things that have been already identified by these independent and objective auditors for the benefit of public education. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by answering 3 questions. How often is public education audited? Who is auditing public education, and why are they auditing public education? To give us a little bit of context. So we'll start off first with how often is public education being audited? I have passed out a data sheet, and if you want to follow along, most of the data points are right there. You can look at it. It's in the handout materials as well. Hopefully you've already had a chance. But we're going to walk through some of these. I can tell you when to turn the page, and you can see exactly where we're going. So starting on that data sheet, there's a big 92 audits, right, in the center. And those are how many audits that have been done in the last 5 years. We're looking roughly from fiscal year 2020 through the beginning of fiscal year 2025. There are 2 additional audits that are still in corrective action status. They've been included because we felt like they were relevant. But roughly in the last 5 years, there's been 92 audits of the public education system. The question is, how often are each of the different elements of the public education system being looked at? And that's, if you look to the right of that 92, you'll see a breakdown. Starting from the bottom and reading up, which is a little unconventional, but I think it'll lend itself better to the presentation. First and foremost, of those 92 audits, 11 of those have been specifically on LEAs, local education agencies, right? So roughly 12%. 19 have been specific to the Board of Education, and 62 of those have been on the public education system as a whole. Now, fortunately for you guys, as the board, you have general control and supervision of public education, so you're typically the primary point of contact or target for those public education system audits. So even though we say 19 have been targeted directly at the State Board of Education, really those 62 have as well. How do we know that? Well, flip that page. If you flip the page and you look on the backside, you can learn that by looking at the recommendations that come from audits. So of those 92 audits, 335 recommendations have been given. What's the breakdown on that? Well, starting at the top and moving down the left-hand side, you see 4 of those are to multiple entities. That's where it directs multiple entities to do something, to take action, right? And then as you move on, well, where we actually start to get some substance there is at the 37. So of those 335 recommendations, 37 of those recommendations have been directly to the legislature. So that's roughly 10%, 11% of audit findings, recommendations are directed to the legislature. 59 of those recommendations are directly to local education agencies, and the remaining 213 recommendations have been directed to this office, the State Board of Education. So roughly 64% of all recommendations coming from those audits are to this office, right? But again, we talk about not all those audits have been directed at the USB, but the recommendations are, which is again, speaking to the broader point that you guys are responsible for general control and supervision of public education. So how do those 213 break down? Well, that's what we've attempted to do there to the side. So of those 213, an additional 7%, 15 of those require you guys to work directly with the legislature. So although it's a recommendation to you, it is a recommendation that you work with the legislature, and without the help of the legislature, probably cannot achieve the objective of that recommendation. Another 67 of those are for you to work with the LEAs, and the remaining 131 of those recommendations are for you and you alone, the State Board of Education, to work on. So in short, or summary, of the 335 recommendations, as we pointed out there, only 131 or 39% of those are directly to the board. So again, reiterating the point that there's an expectation through audit that you do exercise general control and supervision, and you work not only on things specific to USBE, but the public education system in general. All right, so what does that look like year over year? And I've got that up on the slide. It's on your document. If you flip back over to the audit data sheet, you'll see that timeline. What we see there is we're looking at audits on their release date, when they were released, not when they were started. And what we identify by looking at this trend analysis is that from fiscal years 2020 through 2023, that there was an average of 11 audit reports released, right? With a high of 12 and a low of 10, almost no variation. But all of a sudden in 2024, there's a 55% increase, right? We jumped from that average of 11 up to 17. Now, assuming that all audits that are currently open in fiscal year 25 are released in fiscal year 25, what we would then see is an increase of 118% of audits in public education from our 4-year average between 2020 and 2023. That's a significant increase in the number of audits on public education. So obviously, as the frequency of audits goes up, so does the audit, the effort it takes to respond to audits. Adjacent and to the left, bottom left corner of that sheet, you'll see audit status. Well, where are those 92 audits currently at? And the point that I think I want to make here is that 17% in corrective action status. That's 16 audits approximately. So of those 16 audits, they have been in corrective action status an average of 951 days. That means we are over 2.5 years on average trying to close audit recommendations. So it's important to note that that's the average, right? The high, there are plenty of audits, there's a number of audits that have been open 4, 5, even 6 years trying to close. So that's when we were averaging 11 audits per year. Now, if the trend continues and we see 118% increase in 24 audits a year, 25 audits a year, you can only imagine where that's going to go. So, of course, there are a lot of audits that are going on. That's how often we're currently being audited right now. Well, who's doing those audits? Again, I'll focus you back at that 92, but this time on the left-hand side, we provide that breakdown. So of those 92 audits, 14 of those audits have been by your internal audit department. The remaining 78 of those audits have been conducted by external audit agencies. And just above that, we've broken down that 78 as well. What does that look like? Well, of those 78 external audits, 62 were conducted by state audit shops. Think Office of Legislator Auditor General, the Office of the State Auditor. The remaining 16 were conducted by federal audit shops. Your U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Agriculture, the FBI. Why do I find this interesting? Well, that means the time and the effort you guys are spending responding to audit recommendations is usually at the direction of someone else. It's not you directing that internal audit, but someone else making an audit recommendation that we're then having to respond to. When we break down that 62 audits, by OSA and OLAG, the majority of those audits are being done by the Office of Legislative Auditor General, 56%. I find that interesting because a lot of the audits being conducted by OSA are required by law. Think your single audit, your financial statement audit. Those are going to be conducted every single year. The remaining audits, though, by the Office of Legislative Auditor General are prioritized by the legislature. So it's something they're just currently interested in. It's not a reoccurring thing, although that is changing a little bit, and the legislature has prioritized some audits or made them required. That is a changing area a little bit. So in short, who is conducting audits of public education? Well, the answer is everyone. Everyone is doing that. And that is, we've got to be mindful of the fact these figures don't include monitoring that's happening by your management team on site. They don't include LEA-specific audits where they're commissioned by the LEA for their own purposes. Think an LEA's financial audit. So this is the audit landscape. Again, the frequency is increasing, and who's doing it? It looks like it's primarily external, right? It's not internal. It's not being driven by your agenda, but being driven by others' agenda, right, for the most part. So the next question then, to provide some context, is go ahead. Oh, there's a question?
Yeah, we'll take, can we break right here and just ask, we had a couple people that
You
had
can,
questions.
if you'd like, yeah.
Oh,
Of course.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Board Member Carey.
I just have a quick question. So when we look at these 16 audits that were conducted by the federal government, how many of those, I'm just looking at this graphic that you prepared with these 3 circles, how many of those are towards the public education system versus the Utah State Board of Education versus the local education agency? Does that make sense, using this breakout that you provided? Oh, I have to get off.
I can pull that up for you. I can look it up. I don't have it readily available right now, but it's clearly within our data, and I can run a pivot and let you know. But do you have an idea, Debbie?
I'll swap. So audits that are done by the federal government, usually those are program type audits. Many of them are related to the child nutrition program. They come and do management evaluations of those programs quite frequently. There have been a couple of others by the U.S. Department of Education, maybe related to the special education program, that kind of thing. So it is more system related, but many of those audits do look at the State Board of Education and our operations and processes in administering the federal grants. So kind of a hybrid of both the LEA level but the USBE level as well. And we can pull the exact data and get that for you, but that gives you an idea of those federal audits, kind of what they look at.
Do you have additional question?
No, just one comment. Thank you very much. And then if you could send that to all of us, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Board Member Laird, did you have a question?
I had 3 separate, very distinct.
Okay.
First of all, do you have any comparison to other agencies in the state? How many audits are done on the Department of Health and Human Services or the Tax Commission? Is there any comparison there that you know of? I'm not going to make you find it and send it to me. I just wondered if you have any idea.
We do have an idea as far as volume a little bit. By effort, actually quantifying the number of reports that are released, that would be a little bit harder to get to, but it's safe to say, like, for example, the Office of Legislative Auditor General, they post all their reports on the website. We can go out and find that easy. OSA does the same thing. Internal audits is where I think there would be a little bit of variance, and we can see that some state agencies have larger internal audit shops, and therefore we'd expect they're doing more internal audits.
And I don't really care about the internal.
Yeah.
I would hope we would do more internal and there would be fewer external, but you don't know if there's 90% of the audits that I forget the Auditor General does are about education, or is that accurate? 90%'s a little high. That was
I can't remember-
exaggeration for
I
effect.
can't remember the exact percentage, and we do have some legislative individuals from the Legislative Auditor General's office here. I believe they have on their website where you can pull up and you can look at the number of audits, or at least in the past they had it on there, and so we could look and pull that number pretty quickly. But at that time, education was one of the top areas that was being audited quite frequently. And later in the presentation, I mean, we'd say they just hired got an appropriation and hired 5 additional auditors to do audits of education.
So we're justified in feeling paranoid. Yeah. Okay, my second point was...
That was 3 already. That you just asked about the paranoid, so that's... Okay, go ahead.
Cancel that one. It sounds to me, I mean, and again, I don't mean this as harshly as it sounds, but we've got 62 by the state, 16 by the feds. The feds are always the ones pointed out as the boogeymen. They're the ones that are, and 62, excuse me, not 70, but from state government. Sounds like, we maybe ought to adjust our thinking a little bit. That was my second comment. And these were you were very specific to audits then, Kevin. These aren't investigations like the DOJ or anything like that. These are just audits, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to clarify. Yeah, audits. So we're looking specifically at state agencies like Office of Legislative Auditor General. They could do like a management letter that may be included in this. So we're looking more at the work done by audit shops, although there could be slight variations. But there are things like, for example, Office of State Auditor does Project Kids. In the past, that has been conflated with an audit. We've eliminated some of those things to just look at what is more a more traditional audit, you would say, with
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify those things.
Okay, Board Member Vargas, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple. One is, believe it or not, when I get text messages, I tell people what it is, but for the public record, OSA is Dougal, it's the state auditor, and OLAG is the legislative auditor, and then we have the federal auditor. I'm correct in all my responses?
So the federal auditor, unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. The feds are kind of, if you will, structured similar to the state in that they have separate audit shops, right? So you might have an Office of Inspector General that can pertain to the Department of Education versus the Department of Agriculture. So it's not just one auditor for the feds, but yes, there are different audit shops at the federal level. And as far as OLAG or OSA, yes, the Legislative Auditor General in the State Auditor's Office, John Dougal's office at this point.
Awesome, thank you. And then my second question is, you mentioned well over 900 days. What is preventing us from meeting the expectations in these audit the recommendations? Are we just dragging our feet? Are we being obstinate? Is it really that hard? I'm just wondering why is it taking so long?
I'll take that one. I think there's many things, and as you look at the specific audits, the audits that are open and in corrective action status, that would tell the story. So one audit that is still open was an audit of the cactus system several years ago. Well, of course, there has been this ongoing effort with USIMS to address the many problems that were apparent in cactus. And so that's one reason that audit has stayed open, is just, hey, we're working on USIMS. We want to make sure there's accountability. So in that case, that's what's happening. There's another school safety, I think, is another one that's in corrective action status. And of course, there's been a lot going on with legislation and initiatives and things with school safety. So it really is a product of what is the topic of the audit. I will also say with several of the audits, we're working at a strategic level where we talk about the public education system. It's like turning the Titanic, right? It's a big effort to change things at a strategic level. These aren't small audits on just very narrow things like, hey, this is P cards, fix this really quick. So I think that drives as well some of the time that it takes to complete corrective action. Is that to say, could there be some improvement in turnaround and completion? Sure, absolutely, it could be looked at, but in some cases, it's probably justified that it does take time to build systems, to look at initiatives and change programs, work with the legislature as we've been requested to do in some recommendations.
Okay, go ahead.
And we love questions, so keep them coming. All right, so the final question to provide some context is, well, why is public education being audited, right? And so one way that we can evaluate that from a an audit lens, if you will, is examining the type of audits that are being performed. So in the audit universe, if you will, there's typically three types of audits. There's compliance audits, there's financial audits, and there's performance audits. And so you can take a holistic look at that and say, well, what's being audited? Are we being audited for compliance? Are we being audited for financial? Are we being audited for performance? There is, of course, the reality that an audit can contain one or many categories, right? In a lot of cases, we do these strategic audits that Debbie was talking about that involve not only compliance and financial, but performance as well. So it is a little bit harder to grasp at that. What is clear, though, is that with approximately $7 billion of allocated funds, right, nearly half the state's budget, and changing provision of public education, right? It wasn't that long ago that we were districts only, but now we're districts and charters and micro schools and scholarships and educational service providers. And as our systems become more complex, then there's a greater need for oversight or investigation, right, or audit to look and make sure, are we performing as we intended? Another way to kind of look and just see, well, why possibly is looking at statements found within audits. I put one up on the screen for you, right? More than 40% of 2020 Utah high school graduates score an 18 or less on the ACT, despite billions of dollars invested annually in public education. People have questions. They want to know. A couple other ones that I drew from audits as well that I thought were interesting as well was one that was performed about 4 years ago from OLAG, and they said audit findings suggest that the performance of public education should be considered when assessing the value of spending. Again, related to performance, I think. When the Senate was prioritizing the comprehensive education audit, the Senate president at the time pointed out as well, like, we should know the performance of these particular institutions. So again, kind of looking at the general categories, it's like, well, maybe it's hard to say performance, but when you start to look at some of these statements, you might lean towards, is it a question of performance? Is that why we're currently being audited at the rate we're being audited? So I think it's a question. I don't think that we have 100% clarity on why exactly the level of auditing there is, other than to say that, again, we know that we're half the state's budget, and we know that public education is changing and evolving and is more complex, and in a lot of ways, you know, we're more divided than ever. And so people want to know what exactly is going on. So the real question then becomes, well, what's next, right? Hopefully you're all familiar with Voltaire, the French writer and philosopher, but something he was famous for is a statement, or known for, was the statement of judge a man by his questions rather than by his answers. I bring this up today because I feel like this is probably truer today than it's ever been, that we have a responsibility to ask respectful, curious, like non-judgmental questions in an effort to solicit options on how to meet our objectives. And the purpose of this presentation today is to do just that, is through the audit lens, help raise questions on how do we meet our objectives, right? Well, hopefully the purpose or the value of an audit is to help us understand where we're falling short on those objectives and how we can meet those objectives. And so maybe you saw it in the study material session or pieces you have there or not, but we put blank spaces intentionally in those materials so that you guys can jot down questions, so that we can carry on a conversation either today or offline at another time, so that we can start answering some of those questions regarding what audit's doing. You guys have already started that process, right? As we sit and watch the board talk about their mission and their vision and ways that you are committed to academic excellence, but not only that, operational excellence. The purpose of these audits are to continue that conversation and keep those questions coming.
Checking the room to see
Yeah,
if
I was
there's
just looking
anything else
too.
before we
You're good.
move on. Okay. As we start to talk about some of the audit trends and themes, there's a couple of things to keep in mind as we move forward. First, this will be a little bit like the show The Voice, the blind auditions.
Sorry, we do have one question. I apologize before we go any
yes.
further. Yeah. Board Member Davis, do you want to ask a question before we move to the next section?
Yeah, I hope this isn't rhetorical, but I mean, is it possible to ask respectful, curious, non-judgmental questions and have that drive in anybody's audits? I mean, it really, is it feasible? Because For example, I look at the question above. 40% of Utah's students that was up there are scoring below an 18 on the ACT despite, in 2020, despite all this money put in. Why is public education being audited? I mean, on the flip side, you could say, of the states who give the ACT to all of their students, Utah every year scores higher than the national average despite being funded at second to the bottom. So that would give an entirely different question or picture. And how do we use audit to find areas that need improvement and not create perception, because in the beginning it was hard to ask a respectful, curious, or non-judgmental question? How do we do that?
I think you're doing it. And actually, that's what this next part of the presentation is about, is those perceptions and that they vary. And because they vary, is it okay if we're seeing different perceptions and there are perceptions that might challenge what I believe or what you believe? That's okay. And it does open, I think, a broader space for discussion. But we do have to be respectful, and we do have to invest the time to ask those important questions. We are coming at things differently, and it's okay to challenge. And hopefully in knowing, right, we know better, we do better, in knowing a little bit more, we recognize that's a place where we don't need more action. Oh, but that is a place I hadn't really thought of, and maybe we do need a little bit of, action there. So I think you're doing it. I think this space for conversation, it's happening. It's hard, it takes work though.
Okay,
So-
quick follow-up, but this is a little bit unrelated.
Sure.
I just, at some point in your presentation, I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about, I know we had asked that there be some coordination between OSA and our independent audit and OLAG, and I thought OSA was disinterested, or OLAG was disinterested in coordinating. I can't remember which one, but if, can you address that at some point? Because then I heard, we were kind of coordinating with one of them. If you could just help us know where that is.
I'll just address that right now, if that's okay. We have a great relationship with the Office of the State Auditor and the Office of the Legislative Auditor General. We talk with them frequently, of course, because of all the audits. So we try and be aware of the audits that they're doing. As Kevin mentioned, a lot of the audits with the Office of the State Auditor are required in law. Financial statement audits, the audit of the scholarship programs that's required, those kinds of things. So we know pretty much what the Office of the State Auditor is doing. And when they do their annual minimum school program review, they ask us, what areas of risk do you think are there? And I even provided them this year. I said, here's the list of where we're monitoring. Maybe choose somewhere else. So we have worked with the Office of the State Auditor. And then an example with the Office of the Legislative Auditor General. So the board had prioritized an audit of school construction, and we were slated to start that in a few months, but the Legislative Audit Subcommittee also prioritized an audit of school construction. Considering that, we brought to the Audit Committee and the board and said, this could be duplication of effort. Do we really want to do that? And the board decided, no, let's not. And so the board took an audit of school construction off the list of audits that we would be doing. So we are having conversations, not to say that we can control what those offices are doing, but we definitely have conversations to try and understand and reduce duplication where we can.
Thank you. Okay, you can move forward. I just can't see it from here. It's turned sideways, so.
Cindy prompted a question. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
know you'd like to move on, and this
That's all
is
right.
more a comment that responds to Christina's point about how long the corrective action is taking and the number of audits and maybe the comparison with education and other agencies. I think one of the challenges for me, who's watched audits for a long, long time, plus I've actually been a moving part in audits, being a hearing officer or in many kinds of those situations. So I'm just throwing in that experience to say that I've sometimes been an offender. With audits, it's hard sometimes to see clear, an investigation, you are told by DOJ that you do A, B, and C. or you're going to lose funding. Audits are sometimes a little more ambiguous in their conclusions, and it makes it hard sometimes to the point of how long it takes to put agencies or schools or whatever they are into corrective action. It's sometimes to know what you're exactly supposed to do. And then there also the compliance by different entities is not always exactly the same. I've certainly seen times when the legislature or committees of the legislature have said, well, thank you very much, auditors, even our own, but we're not going to do that. So it makes it hard being those school entities to say, oh, this is what we'll do and this is how fast we'll do it. You said jump, we'll say how high. It makes me, as an individual board member, a little bit more reluctant to just jump right on the whatever was recommended by the auditors. So thanks for letting me.
Yeah, and I think those are based on, it's a risk-based, right? An entity would decide whether it was worth the risk, or the length of time sometimes is associated with that. But go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, right, we've all heard the idiom, right? There's two ways to skin a cat. And maybe that's not the greatest one to use in this venue, but it's like, yeah, it's not as simple usually as saying, well, you have to do this, because there's many ways in a lot of cases where you can resolve the issue. You can, change the law, or you can comply with the law, right? So it is not always as simple as black and white. There's a lot of gray area, and so risk becomes a primary factor in determining what that looks like. If you look at recent legislation as well, right, with the Office of the Legislative Auditor General, we know that our responses had to change, but we still have the option of, are we going to concur and do what they've recommended? Are we going to provide an alternative? Are we not going to do it? So it's really never as simple as like, here it is. Yes, A, you have to take this option, or B is, whatever. So it's, again, there's a number of options, and for that reason, it's usually not black and white.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, we will move on. We were at the couple of points of general information as I start talking about audit trends and themes. This will be like the TV show The Voice, where there's blind auditions. This will be study session blind audits. We have removed auditing entity names, audit titles, LEA names, program names, because we want to focus on themes. Themes would be systemic or pervasive things that we're seeing. Also, we're showing examples. If you would like full context, the best way to get that is to go to the full audit report. So if you have questions on where examples are coming from, catch us afterwards. We're happy to let you know where these examples are coming from. Okay, let's see.
We have a question.
Okay.
So we redact it for to emphasize the points of focus, and I understand that. When these audits are released to the public, that information remains redacted, or are they able to get visibility on the LEA and the results?
You didn't redact the audit. You just took pieces from the audit for illustrative purposes. Is that
right? We're quoting from audits, but we're just not citing the source with the quote. So absolutely, when these audit reports are published, LEA names are included, auditing entity names are included. All of that is there. Just for purposes of this presentation, that's why we removed it, just to focus on themes. We didn't want anyone focused on a specific LEA or anything.
Thank you, and that was my understanding. Mike, the core question is, are there audits that are conducted where that information is issued publicly in a redacted state? Are there any types of circumstances that the law permits that to take place? I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking.
So there are definitely audit reports. Sometimes we use sampling as a methodology. And when we sample, we say, we're going to provide results in aggregate, meaning we're not going to list the LEAs. Usually in those circumstances, the report is not listing the LEAs, but if somebody came back and asked us for that information, it's grandmable, it's public information, so we would provide it. It's just not published. There could be a circumstance, though, where if there was specific information under the grandma law of protected information where, yeah, we might not provide the name. I don't know if it would be an LEA name, more of an individual name or a circumstance, and that would be protected, and it would need to be redacted before a report was published.
And in your experience, that is the absolute, not the default position. The default is we include that information, we push it out.
Yes, for the
Okay.
most part, all reports are public. The information's going forward, so it would be a rare circumstance to redact.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so you may have heard the phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees, or maybe even the reverse, you can't see the trees for the forest. And what this is talking about is just perception that we were just talking about. Is your perception, is it narrow? Is it broad? Do we have a clear picture of what's happening? So as we look at these pictures, what do we see? Did your eye immediately go to the ballerina or the dolphin or the apple core, or is it the silhouettes or the shark that are listed, right? They're just different perceptions. They're not wrong, they're just different. So as mentioned, it's the same with public education. We are all coming from different places, so we'll all have a different perception of public education. And if we took a few seconds and I said, hey, jot down 3 to 5 words that characterize your perception of public education, you could list those out. Well, audits do the same thing. And it's like picking up a mirror and saying, hey, look here, or look at this. And as Kevin was mentioning the landscape, right? We're highlighting, here's the mirror, maybe look down here, maybe look up a little higher. That's what audits are doing. They're focusing on a certain point that maybe you're aware of, maybe the words you would write down, your perceptions are the same as an audit, maybe they're different. And again, it's okay that there's a challenge there a little bit to say, have I ever thought of that before? And maybe I haven't, maybe I have, maybe that changes what I think, and it's all okay, right? We're just broadening our understanding. So we went through the different audit reports and we came up with some words in these audit reports that could be putting the perception of public education. It could be telling a story about public education. And maybe there's a question, well, really, where did these words come from? What is the context of where these words are coming from with audits? And so we wanted to look at that a little bit, and here's our first couple of examples. One of these examples is talking about data and saying, hey, it's not easily understood, it's not easily accessible, so there's some external efforts to increase transparency and accountability. So in response to the perception about data, there have been these external efforts, and Kevin mentioned one with Project Kids. Several years ago, the Office of the State Auditor, they started getting data from us, from LEAs, from other places, put it together, clean it, run some analyses, put it on their website. And now every year they update that. So that's an external effort in play. We talked about the Legislative Auditor's Office. They have an education excellence initiative where I think it was about 4 years ago, the statute changed so they could audit individual LEAs. Part of that was looking at data. And now they have on their website, and we provide to them, I think on an annual basis, data that they publish on their website in various analyses. Again, it's to tell the story of public education as they're seeing it. It's to address some perceived gaps. Those are the external efforts that are happening in this space because of some audits that have occurred. Let's see, I don't want to miss anything, but I think we'll move on. So common themes, right? What really is driving the story of public education, the perceptions of public education? And as we reviewed the audits, we came up with 3 common themes. And as I say themes, these are systemic or pervasive things that came up. When we read all those audits out there, it's thousands of pages, and we tried to dial down and pull out some different quotes that we thought were representative. That ended up being about 45 pages. We dialed that down into the information document, and so you have a few examples, but just know that's where these themes are coming from, that body of work. So the first is knowledge, skills, and abilities, or competence. The second, policies, procedures, and processes. And third, quality information or data. So knowledge, skills, and ability, and I'm going to define the word competence because sometimes that word is a little bit tricky. And the definition comes from the Green Book, which is Standards for Internal Control in the Federal Government, another mouthful title, but that book is really all about how to achieve your objectives. And it defines competence as the qualification, let's see, and I should have brought my glasses, qualifications to carry out assigned responsibilities. It requires relevant knowledge, skills, and abilities. So when I was in 2nd grade, I started playing soccer. I learned about soccer. I went to practices in Murray, superintendent, right? I was there on those fields, McMillan Elementary, playing soccer. And I practiced and I played all the way through high school. So I really had a lot of knowledge, skills, and abilities in soccer. Well, a few years ago, some of my nephews started playing lacrosse. And I have realized in going to their games, my soccer KSAs are not transferable to lacrosse. Really, the only thing that is the same is there's a field. They play these sports on fields. But the rules are different, the ball is different, the equipment's different, it's all different. So I am in a process of learning, of becoming qualified to have some knowledge about lacrosse so I can speak intelligently with my nephews about this game. So a couple of examples from audits then about competence or knowledge, skills, and abilities. Okay, so one example says 10 out of 16 LEAs were unaware of a rule. 10 out of 16, that's a pretty high percentage for a sample, but they're unaware, meaning there was a lack of knowledge there. Probably there was something happened at the legislature that prompted a change or a new board rule, and somehow these LEAs just weren't aware of the rule. So lack of knowledge, it happens. In another audit, it talked about inexperience, and that led to some incorrect allocations of funds. Inexperience could also be lack of knowledge, maybe lack of understanding how to interpret knowledge that you might gain from a law, or maybe you didn't quite know how to put the formula in a spreadsheet or another application. So being unaware, being inexperienced, knowledge is really critical, and I think sometimes it is overlooked. And there's a quote, another quote from the Green Book, one of our favorite books, that kind of talks about this, that says how important in the government sector, which public education is, objectives related to compliance with applicable laws and regulations, they're very significant. We need to know the laws and regulations. It drives so much of what we do, and it drives a lot of perceptions that come from audits, those laws and regulations. Is that an actual book? Yes, it is. The current version is 86 pages. The revised version coming out soon is 156. So.
And that's related to auditing, right?
Yes,
the Green Book, auditing.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, and it's for the federal government. They're light years ahead of us in this space, so we use it frequently as a best practice book. It's a great read. Again, it's all about how to achieve your objectives. You'll do my work. All right. Good enough. So there's so many laws out there, though. How is one person supposed to know all the laws about public education? It's just not possible, which means it's really important that we have policies and procedures, which is the next theme.
Well, before you leave that.
Yes.
And the chair's not there, but Molly,
okay.
Can you, I just had a question / comment because these are some of the things that really challenge me about being understanding audit. If you go to the last slide,
before that,
previous slide, LEAs were unaware. What does that mean in an LEA the size of granite? That every single principal was not aware of something? Does it mean the superintendent? Now, meaningful if the superintendent doesn't know, but the impossibility of that is just staggering. And to get a statement like that in an audit is completely unhelpful for us. And for this person who's, again, looked at audits over the last 40 years. So that's why I find that not very persuasive of anything. If the audit told me of the 700 principals that we interviewed, 348 of them were unaware, then it means something. But just I read LEAs were unaware. That is not helpful information. And I hope that was non-judgmental and
curious.
kind.
It was great, respectful.
And faithful.
It was everything.
Well, it was none of that, but go ahead.
Reverend, right?
Yeah.
Kevin Johns will respond to that.
I viewed that as a very respectful question. So in this particular case, because it was an internal audit, that was 63% of the LEAs that we dealt with were 100% non-compliant with that law. So the understanding then from our perspective, from an audit perspective, is not a single person at the LEA was either aware or was in a position to actually affect change. So yeah, we went and we talked to the superintendent, we talked to the board, we talked to whomever it was, whatever contact point. If it was special education, then probably their director, and then said, demonstrate compliance with this law. and 63% of your LEAs couldn't. So yes, as far as that's concerned, whether it's a principal, a special education director, a superintendent, your board, whomever, that LEA was non-compliant with the law. So the summation of it would be, yeah, the LEA is not aware, whether that's whomever it is. So
Yeah.
there's the, unfortunately, it's not our position to say who's responsible at the LEA to comply with that law. Only that the LEA is responsible to comply, and the LEA is not, and therefore it's the LEA who's in non-compliance.
Just from one person's perspective, if you'd said in the audit, or if this was internal or external, not even being critical, I'm just saying if it had said the LEA was non-compliant, that says something different to me than the LEA is unaware.
Yeah, and I will say in that report it did say that as well. We're just pulling out individual
Gotcha.
statements, right? There was a
Okay.
table that showed it, so it's all there, yeah.
That clarifies. Thank you.
Okay, keep going.
Good. Okay. Yeah, so this is an example of full context of the audit report is very important, and we're just pulling out a couple of things to make the point. So the second theme that we found is related to policies and procedures. And Green Book, that wonderful book, says that management should design policies and procedures to achieve objectives and respond to risks. And I think it's important to point out that Green Book does not say management should design policies and procedures for everything. It's just not possible. Like, you can't know it all, you can't write policies and procedures for it all. But there are some policies and procedures that are really important to address risk so we can achieve policies and procedures. A quick example, a few weeks ago, maybe like you were watching the Olympics. And towards the end of the Olympics, there was quite a controversy. It's still ongoing with women's gymnastics and the individual competition. I believe it was the floor routine. And at the end of the competition, it looked like the Romanian gymnast was going to have the bronze medal. But the United States appealed and said, oh, there was a problem with scoring. And if you fix it, then Jordan Childs, who is pictured here, she would have gotten the bronze medal. So there was some going back and forth and what's happening. So they did. They took this medal away from the Romanian gymnast. We're going to give it to Jordan Childs. Well, Romania then appealed to the Court of Arbitration of Sports. That is a thing. And an article popped up on my phone because I've trained my phone to give me articles about education and sports. And this article, I took a screenshot. It said, the Court of Arbitration said, the International Gymnastics Federation did not track the timing of the inquiry by the United States to appeal, or have any guidelines in place to assure proper protocol was followed. This elite level of the Olympics, and they were missing a policy and a procedure that this has to be devastating for these two athletes, for the reputation of the Olympics and the gymnastics kind of community as a whole. That it's devastating. Policies and procedures protect people from things like this happening. So let's look at a couple of examples from our audits. So one example, the one on the right, talks about, hey, the state board, we adopted state finances accounting policies and procedures. As we should, that's great. But we didn't then go and write our own policies and procedures about, well, what does that look like here at the state board, right? So we needed to be a little bit more specific to make sure that we were going to comply. Another example talked about there's an LEA and the failure to comply with it, it failed to comply with its own policies, and so there is some non-compliance that happened there. I see a light.
Chair.
I have
Too late.
We're going to get, all right, can you write it down, and can we get to the end of this section? Yes, just because
This was a good question.
it's going to still be a good question.
Oh, boy. Okay. Thank you,
If
Chair.
you don't mind,
No.
I'm just
I'll
looking
go
at
fast.
time is the only thing, because then we're kind of narrowing it. We're not still, get to the end of this section, and then will you let me know when you get to the end? So
Yes, absolutely. So what these two examples point out, and these are kind of pro tips for policies and procedures. Policies and procedures need to be designed, they need to be formal and written. Everyone needs to know about them, and they need to be implemented, right? You need to train people on them. They have to be accessible, and then you need to check them to make sure it's working. Is the design working? Is the implementation working? It's very important. So these two examples show both of those things. In one case, it was a design problem. Okay, if I know that, I could quickly fix it. Or if it's an implementation problem, I have it written, I just need to do it, right? It's helpful to know if it's a design problem or an implementation problem in moving to corrective action. So policies and procedures, very important. An unwritten policy is just inconsistency waiting to happen. And an unimplemented policy is non-compliance waiting to happen. It's really not worth the paper that it's written on. So that's kind of the end of theme 2,
Okay,
policies and procedures.
now we will take that question.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead,
Chair.
Board Member Carey.
Yeah, I was just talking to Superintendent Dixon about this, and sometimes we get a new law that's passed, and we say, we don't need a board rule about this, right? They're smart people, they'll figure this out, they'll do it. And other times we say, we need to draft a board rule. Based on what I think I'm hearing, like, is that something that maybe we would need a policy in terms of this board to say, look, in these circumstances, this would be best to craft a rule, or do we just continue to do these as one-offs?
Do you want?
Just your thoughts, generally. I'm not asking for.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in
Thank you,
some
Chair.
cases, I think laws are passed that require rulemaking. And in that case, of course, the board would write a rule. In other circumstances, perhaps a board rule is not necessary. And then I think that's a place where, well, let's risk assess. Is this a place where the board could provide additional clarity that would be helpful for LEAs? And so we should write a board rule. And then maybe there are those other things in law where it's, again, risk assess and say, it's really not necessary. We don't need to write another board rule about this, right? Just writing a rule to write a rule. But then the question, I think, would be, are LEAs responsible to understand everything that comes out of legislative session? Or what is the board's responsibility in helping LEAs understand the breadth of what's coming out of legislative session? Is it just on them? They should have the knowledge, right? We're back to knowledge. Or is the board, should there be some technical assistance there with everything coming from legislative session? So does that help?
Okay, and Board Member Bogus, do you have a question? I'm trying to, I see a light,
Yeah,
maybe?
I do.
Okay.
I'm wondering, and, you know, we talked about being prickly. Are we, when I look at this, are we in a space of just incompetence? How do you, and I genuinely want to know, how do you fail to comply with your own policies? It's a genuine question, like, I don't fully understand how we can get to that place and not have something where we're either just obstinate or incompetent. And if we're not in that space, can you help me understand how we're not?
Yeah. I think we would classify this as a curious question, and it fits within the definition. In a lot of cases, we have different tiers throughout an organization, right? And one tier, and we'll say maybe top management, is responsible for drafting a policy procedure, but it's not well implemented, so we're not aware of it. So it's actually quite common where policies and procedures are being drafted, but those who are required to follow those policies and procedures are not aware of them. Or originally, when that policy and procedure was drafted, it was maybe drafted in collaboration with the person who's actually going to implement it, but then you have turnover, and succession planning or onboarding or whatever you have in place maybe isn't adequate at that point to communicate it. So to Debbie's earlier point, I mean, it could fall on many fronts. It can be a design problem, it can be an implementation problem, but then that's why there's that third component, and it's monitoring. Is there monitoring going on to make sure we are complying with our policies and procedures? Because it's one thing to not comply with the policy and procedure for a day, a week, a month, or whatever. It's another thing not to comply with your policy and procedure for years. Another example might be, in some cases, policy and procedure just falls out of relevance. So you wrote the policy and procedure, and it was relevant for current code, but then the code changes, but the policy and procedure doesn't. So you're not following your policy and procedure. Maybe that's a good thing because you are complying with code. So there is an entire process that's important to follow through with in design, implementation, and then monitoring to make sure, are your policies and procedures still relevant? Are they designed well, and are they being implemented? And there's so many ways where you can fall down on that, which is why, to Debbie's earlier comment, not all things require a policy and procedure. There is risk assessing to say, where's our greatest risk that we could be non-compliant or have bad data or whatever it may be. And then in those places, we design and implement control activities, which are documented in policy and procedure. So does that answer your question, Member Bogus? Okay, thanks.
Okay, and Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be really clear. When you look at that slide, it makes it sound like we don't have anything in place. So I appreciated Kevin's explanation just now. We have standard operating procedures for almost everything. We have internal policies for almost everything. We have control activities. What what audit helps us do is to test some of those things. So they might say, do people know where to find them? Or are they clear? Or are people following them? So I just, from a public perspective, when you look at that, and Member Bogus, to say, are we just incompetent? Like, okay, dagger to the heart. No, it's all right. I just, I went on defense a little bit here, or a lot, just to say that it's part of what audit's job is to test for these controls that we have in place. So I don't want it ever to sound like we don't have any policies or controls in place. Please nod, auditors, in agreement. So I just wanted to clear that for the public record, because if you look at that, it can, just looking at that without understanding what's behind it can make it sound like, yeah, we are incompetent. And I just want to assure this board and the public, we have the controls and the policies and desk manuals and all of the things in place. And we've worked very, very hard over the last 8 years, I think, to get there. And audit continues to help us to refine those things when they test them for us.
And I just want to add a little something to that. And this is the beauty of being in government type settings, is when I first got involved in politics, it was amazing to me that when someone said there's 1,000 bills out there, and then I realized that they're adjustments to big laws. Like often it's just a simple line or it's a section of code. It's not, and what that speaks to, and we have this, that's why we have committee meetings, right? That what that speaks to is a modification and an improvement upon where we were. So just to go where superintendent is that the audits are used to say, where can we improve upon, right? We're going to take this piece that we have, we've learned a little bit more information, and now we're making the system better. It's the same we do with laws, we do it with rules, and it's that relevance, right? And it's a beautiful thing because we can make errors too. And then we can move forward. We asked a question earlier even about, is this open and public meeting? And then just thinking, what does that mean? And then the comparison there, right? And that's what, to me, that's what the audits do, is they're a comparison. How do we improve upon and make the system better? So anyways, okay, go to the next section.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And it's a great lead into the next section, which is on data and quality information, reliable data, relevant data. You might not have known, I was not aware that in 1973, there was a toilet paper shortage. And it occurred because Johnny Carson, public figure, comedian, stated in one of his shows that there was a toilet paper shortage, and he neglected to include the word potential toilet paper shortage. So what millions of people heard is there's a toilet paper shortage, which led to millions of people going to the store, buying toilet paper. I'm sure other people saw that. Panic buying ensues. There is no toilet paper on the shelves, right? We all want our toilet paper, not something you want to run out of. So there was this panic involved with toilet paper, and it was all because of some bad information. Right, people made decisions based on bad information. So a couple of examples from audits, and there's several in the information document as well. And we tried to pull examples that are especially relevant right now to topics being discussed. So these are reflective of conversations with chronic absenteeism. And actually it goes to the conversation that was happening earlier as well. We have LEA systems that are gathering data, and they send that data up to the State Board of Education. And when the audit looked at that, the boundary information at the LEA, and then looked at what information the USBE had from LEAs, it was different. At some point, somewhere, that information was changed. So these examples show, and it has both an LEA error rate, so 10 of 13, 77% of LEAs, or 8 of 11, 73% of LEAs had, and there are student exit dates that did not match between the two. There are days attended that did not match between the two. And then there's also specific records we looked at where the auditors looked at where, hey, this is, the actual student records, and these are very high error rates, right? 51% of student records with days attended don't match. Do you want to make a policy decision on chronic absenteeism based on that data? right? We're asking questions, is what should this look like? Where are problems happening, right? And student exit dates, that can impact membership, and membership can impact funding. So this can be very significant. Data is crucial to policymaking, to governance, to administration. We need relevant and reliable data. One of our recent audits, we went back and looked at our audits from back to 2018 and noted that there have been data and documentation problems in every audit that we've done since 2018. Now, this is different areas, but it is a pervasive issue, is data. So it's something to be aware of when you are making policy, when you're looking at governance, when you're considering, and as you are, the conversation was just being had and will continue to be had. But data is an area of concern that was noted in the audits.
And can I just add, this is why Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones is like, we have to get this right? Whatever it needs to be, we have to get it right. If we need, however we need to work with whatever, we can't just complacently go on, right? And I'm sure that's what you were alluding to, but that is key, and that's what we're finding in these audits, is we have to have accurate data, we have to be able to access it, and we have to make it usable. So anyways.
And as Debbie pointed out, there are a lot of audits to back that up. And so at what point, do you have to start from scratch, or, what do you do? So it's a great question. A very curious, respectful, non-judgmental question. Okay, so in summary, just like the U.S. Olympic team, public education's on the podium. I think we stand to get a silver or bronze, but just like Jordan Childs, not all news is good news. Just like the toilet paper shortage, not all news is good news, right? We've got some bad news, both from internal and external audits, right? Opportunities for improvement. So think of those 335 recommendations on the data sheet. We have an opportunity to improve. So, like Voltaire said, next, right, we're going to be judged by the questions we ask. And again, as we pointed out, the purpose of this presentation is to get us asking questions. What do we need to do next in order to change public education? What respectful, curious, non-judgmental questions can we have? Because I'll tell you, as an auditor, and I did not dream to become an auditor when I was 13 years old going to junior high or whatever. Nope, I just fell into this job because it paid well and I like Debbie. But the reality is, we don't take offense to questions. We want questions. In a lot of cases, we want to make sure we got it right. Did we get it right when we do the audit? So it's not as if we came in, we took somebody's file and we went back and we read it and then we concluded. That's not how it works. We ask a lot of questions. We spend months and months asking questions to make sure we got it right. So again, we're just trying to encourage that you guys do the same. Ask questions of us as we issue these audits. I know that the Legislative Auditor General and his staff feel the same way, and the State Auditor's Office and the federal government ask questions. We want to ask questions. We want questions to be asked so that we can get it right, because the whole point is to add value. And if we do that, we believe that we can change the narrative. The audit narrative can go from inaccessible, non-compliant, deficient to accessible, compliant, sufficient, strong, leading. That's the whole point of audit. The point of audit is to change or identify areas where improvements needed, and then work together with management to make those changes. And that's our challenge today. That's our message today. Is there's an opportunity before us. We read 5,000 pages of audit in the last 2 weeks. We summarized it. We tried to boil it down, but in all reality, it's going to take a heavy lift by everyone to do our due diligence, to read those 5,000 pages, to find out what those auditors are identifying, and then work together to fix it. And so with that, that's the end of our discussion. We appreciate the opportunity to come and share some high-level comments based on audits. Please don't take them out of context. Realize we pulled 10 sentences out of 5,000 pages for context, right? But it is to make the point that there is room for improvement. 335 recommendations later, public education is getting better. It's getting better, but there's room for improvement. So, and with that, we're happy to answer any other questions. I do see some lights, and we'll entertain that.
Yeah,
and
board
happy
member,
to
we'll take
move on.
just a few minutes of questions once for time. But
Actually, I don't have a question. I just have a comment for Debbie on the soccer versus, and I think it pertains to the number of laws that we have each year. So my husband is a ref for lacrosse, and they have a 990 rule. It says after 9 years, a ref knows 90% of the rules. So you have 9 years left before you have to worry about it. But I think we look at that with all the changes that we have every year. Just as we start to implement something new, we have a legislative session that changes something else. And then we make a policy to clarify, simplify. We did our strategic plan today that, again, changes it a little bit. And so, I love the thought of asking the questions, but also just giving some grace sometimes to recognize everybody's constantly in a state of flux in education.
Thank you. I think just not even a state of flux, but continually trying to learn and making sure they're within the parameters, right? So I do think that grace thing is an important thing, and being thoughtful so we can move forward. Okay, so just expectation thing here. I think we're going to see if we can take the motion on the discretionary funds, and then we do need there's a couple of options here. The body can decide what they want to do. I'm just throwing stuff out there. We need to do personnel in our executive, if the body chooses that, and I think the any discussion about what the strategic plan will need to be later. I just don't know that we've got the people or capacity to.
Can I make a quick comment before Debbie leaves?
Oh, yes, please.
Sorry, I had my light on, but I did have a question, but I'll forgo it. But I will say there's a reason that Debbie and her team were voted to win, awards by all their auditing peers across the state. And we can tell that they really take their job seriously, and we appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott, do you? It's just on this item.
Yeah, I'm
Or
sorry,
did
I
you
thought
have
said the
another comment?
discretionary
Yeah,
report.
that's it.
Okay.
So let's
Sorry.
I just want to remind the board what's before us. The recommended action, and I'll just review the recommended action. If someone wants to make the motion, then we'll go there. That the board designate an additional $100,000 for available state discretionary funds for a total of $150,000 in direct staff to release, again, the request for proposal. More or less, that's what it is. If there's someone, okay, I didn't make the motion. You want to make that motion? Well, I was reading it out. Technically, I usually shouldn't make the motion where I'm the chair, but I could. Okay, I'll second it. Yeah, we'll put the motion up on the board. Yeah. You want to read it out?
I'm 56. I'm lucky I can see the. Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
That the board designate an additional $100,000 from available state discretionary funds for a total of $150,000 and direct staff to release again the request for proposal for the procurement of services of an external auditor accounting firm to perform an audit and analysis of federal programs at the state education agency level. And I do have one question about that.
Yeah.
Does that, and this may be for Scott, does that encompass the fact that really what we're looking for is that cost-benefit analysis? Does that need to be spelled out, or this is sufficient to capture that?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
the RFP does state or will explicitly state that the analysis is a cost-benefit analysis, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
But, so the motion doesn't have to state that,
Okay.
we just said analysis.
And I'll second that. So, okay. Is there any discussion to the motion? Board Member Bogus, you have a light on, I think?
Yeah, I just am wondering, there appears to be a grammatical error where it says to release again. Does
Yeah.
that affect the motion?
So Chair, if I may, we had released the original RFP, so now if the board directs to add additional funds, we need to re-release or release the RFP again so that more people know of the opportunity, including the one respondent we had, can resubmit again. So it has to go out again.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to say. Maybe it didn't come across that way, so.
They're gonna it's gonna have to be done again.
Well, I
Is that-
understand that, but the way it's, well, it might just be syntax.
Is there, okay.
It just does not read well to me.
Okay, yeah.
As long as it doesn't change what it does, I don't care.
Okay, Board Member Davis, do you have a light on? Okay.
Just speaking to the motion, I was on board with 50,000. I don't know if I'm on board with 150,000. Can we not get spreadsheets that we already have and say, this amount comes from the federal government, this percentage is used for administration, this percentage goes to Title I kids, this percentage goes to special ed kids? I mean, there's only so many things federal funds are being used for. And then
No.
It's all programs.
it's all programs.
federal
I mean,
programs.
I feel like we can get some spreadsheets for less than $150,000 to take some initial looks at this. And then we can kind of determine, is this something that's worth it? If we're spending 54% of the money we're getting on administration, is it really worth it to jump through the hoops? Or
And
are we spending
yeah.
5%? And can we start there before we spend $150,000 on this?
Did you have a comment, Board Member Hart?
Well, my question, I don't know if anyone can answer this. What are we going to do with this information when we get it? Anybody have any idea on what we're going to do with this information?
I'd like to answer that.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I think this is important. We just heard from the auditors about the importance of understanding what's working and what's not working. And I know that as I've discussed other stakeholders, both elected and in education, one of their concerns is, what is the real benefit we're getting from all these federal dollars? And on the surface, I was shocked by that question. I would think, well, it's the money, right? Like, we need those funds. Their response is, well, how much does it cost the state, USBE, to oversee the administration of these funds? I would think that the audit would show that there is a monetary benefit to the state of Utah. That would be my instinct based on what I've learned, but I don't know. And I don't know if anyone in the room really knows, and my hope is that this audit shows, is there a financial upside to continue to receive these funds which place restrictions on the recipient? And I'm hoping that the audit shows that it does. It may not, but either way, I think it leads to a discussion on better policy.
And might I just add, I don't think it's just a matter of pulling, to me, a cost analysis isn't a matter of just looking at this money went here and this money went here, right? That's not, to me, a cost analysis is broader than that. It actually says this is the time that's committed, this is how much time the LEAs, this is how much time is spent within the classroom, right? I think it would be broader than that. Maybe I'm wrong. If we're just looking at numbers, it would, cost analysis is a broader overreach. It speaks to the long-term impact and the outcomes associated with something. So,
I would just, this would just be limited to, that cost analysis would just be limited to USBE. This would not involve any of the LEAs. That
Right,
would
the
be
state
in,
agency.
that's right, that's right.
hundreds of
I forgot
thousands,
we
if
did
not, that
merit.
would be
Yeah, yeah.
significantly more money. So this
Okay.
is just for us.
And Madam Chair, if I can answer this or offer this to Board Member Davis's concern. So many audit firms, so 2 audit firms called me directly and said, we love you guys, we'd love to do this, we're doing it for other states. They're just overwhelmed though. There's not enough audit firms to do something like this. The benefit of doing a cost-benefit analysis from an external party that's well qualified to do it, those types of things, who's done it before, is you're getting more than just the spreadsheet that Scott downloads and says, okay, here's 3%. What they'll do is they'll correlate how much we're spending on administrative costs. Say, just as an example, I'm just giving an example, I'm not reaching any conclusion here, how much money, federal money, we use to pay our employees to get X amount of kids fed, and are we meeting that? And they'll correlate that with, because you heard CEA Davis say, hey, look, the federal government, Department of Ag comes, they do their things to correlate how well we're doing feeding kids, how many kids got fed, how many qualified. those types of things. That's what you get, and you could get it from us, from staff, but I just don't have the depth and the time to do that. I mean, I can, and it would be accurate, and it would be very, very good, but we have so many other tasks and missions to accomplish on a day-to-day basis. When we were asked about this, I was the one that actually recommended an external look at this. So, Madam Chair,
May I
hopefully
follow
that
up?
helps with the
Yes,
context
go ahead if you have
of
another
this,
question.
Yeah, just to follow up with that.
Okay.
If they're doing this in other states, I mean, could we look at a similarly situated state of a similar
Sure.
size and
Sure.
look at what the audit results are from that state and kind of get a feel and see what the trends are for those other states that are doing it, and then decide if we want to move forward in our state with this amount of money? The second question is, did the companies that responded, would they consider doing just the Title IX piece? At least the $50,000 was specific for just Title IX and looking at the implications, because what are the costs going to be to implement these new Title IX rules? I mean, that is a really important question. So is there a way to siphon it out?
No.
But it's on the background right there.
Okay, so the context of the Title IX reference was, if you go back to the original motion that was made, this discussion did center around Title IX. However, and I believe it was Board Member Carey, he made it clear that of the $100,000 that would be set aside, $50,000 would be used to retain a law firm to examine the Title IX portion, and $50,000 would be used for this.
Right.
This purpose,
So
right?
I'm asking, would they pick it up if we narrowed it down right now just for the Title IX?
Well, and as part of that discussion, if I may, Madam Chair, through you to Board Member Davis, we also expressed to the board and tried to clarify that we don't at this level get Title IX funding, right? We don't get that. So if you want a cost-benefit analysis, so to speak, of the other federal programs, we don't receive money to administer or oversee Title IX at this level. My understanding was this other $50,000 for the portion was to look at all the additional or other federal programs besides Title IX in the context of the overall conversation that occurred. That's my understanding, Madam Chair. Hopefully that helps clarify.
So the background
Sorry.
is not
Yeah,
descriptive
I think
of
what
we're
happened is
doing.
the background got pulled in from the original. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah,
no
it
Title
was
IX.
brought, yes, ma'am.
No Title IX
No
can be
Title
involved
IX,
in this.
ma'am.
You just can't. Oh, I'm not sure. Did someone, were you finished? Okay. Do you have, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. So it's my understanding that the original motion was that all federal funds for all federal programs administered by USBE would be covered in the audit. Title IX, we don't get a dime for that. So it's not going to be part of this audit either way because there's no money attached. But if there is a federal dollar received by this body, and I think 80–90% of that is our Title I.
No, a
No,
majority
it's
of the federal funds
nutrition.
received is CNP.
Oh,
Of
yeah.
the 600+ million, we're estimating for 25, 2/3 of that is CNP.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this is every federal dollar received by this body. That's what the audit would, this cost analysis would encompass.
Correct.
Okay.
That's staff understanding, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's relevant to the time and to a lot of things going on. I just think
Well-
looking at this in depth is so.
Well, Madam Chair, I want to, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't, through you, answer her question about could we look at other state audits? Those are, most of them are ongoing now, so I don't know when those would actually be available. But however, we can put into the scope of work to ask a firm, if they were selected, to incorporate other findings from other states. So, but the timing, I can't guarantee, so.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not, I think I would want it relevant to Utah, and maybe
Okay.
personally, but I guess the findings, I don't know, maybe they're relevant to if they're other states and other areas, I'm not sure. Board Member Lear, yeah.
Thank you. I've got to say, I was in for 50,000. I'm not in for 150,000. or any larger amount of money. I would be interested if the state legislature came to us and said, we stand ready to write you a check tomorrow for any money that the federal government is contributing to public education or the USDB or whatever piece of it you expect. I am not of a mind right now to say, how would we make up that money? I don't believe, if indeed we get the information in some other way from other states, from a comparison for $50,000, then of an analysis, then I would be willing, but I'm not even interested in spending $150,000 until we know that the legislature, if it turns out that we are losing money, if we give up federal funds, that they're ready to fill us, not in some convoluted Byzantine scheme, but just here's a check for that money and you give up federal funds. So I'm not interested in
was that, okay, and I don't know that, was that in the scope somewhere?
Well, no, it isn't in the scope, but that's my, yeah, what comes of this? And I'm saying, I am sure that we will lose money in education. And I know that sounds maybe presumptuous or you can call it whatever, but I know we will. And we can't afford, being second to last in the nation in funding does not mean we suddenly can give up on saying there are certain reasons we need more money for education. So I'm not interested in learning something I believe we've already explored, especially if the amount to learn it is now tripled. Until somebody says, I'll write you a check. If there is indeed money education loses, if we have that check in hand, because otherwise my hands never leave my arms, and I'm not doing that anymore.
Okay, Board Member Straight.
So if I'm hearing that correctly, I think most of us, well, I'll speak for myself, I would be very interested in the concept of giving up federal funding. But then the other question I have on top of that is, it's a very specific reason why the state is challenging Title IX. It's very, very narrow. I don't think the state is saying that we won't follow IDEA. I don't think the state is saying that we won't follow the other laws. And even within Title IX, we're compliant with almost all of it, and I don't think the state plans on not being involved in Title IX or supporting it. So my question is, would we still, if we give up all the federal funding for school lunch and breakfast, if we gave all of that up, would we still have free and reduced lunch? If we pay for it. Okay, so, but what about IDEA? If there's, and we're giving money to Title I, okay? Or do we want to give up the federal funding because we want to do something different with Title I children, or for IDEA, or whatever the program may be? And so, I'm interested in the concept though, because it'd be nice to be fully self-sufficient, but I'm not sure it relieves all of the obligations of what federal law says.
Okay, and I'm
Madam
just
Chair.
going to refer back to what the amendment is, or the motion. Yes, go ahead.
So, and without even going further, or in the context of this, Board Member Straight brings up great questions. Here's the thing, though, and I've been around the block a lot, right, on federal money. At the end of the day, the key question always is, if we say we're not going to accept Title I money, it does not exempt you from the laws. It doesn't exempt you from the federal laws. So, and this has worked before, so I would make this suggestion, is if you're considering saying, what would happen if we didn't take Title I money, then we need to do it on what are the requirements of the laws of Title I right now. right? Because even if you find another source of funding, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna not have to still report, or you're still not gonna have to comply with a federal law. And that's especially the case in IDEA, and hopefully I'm getting some head nods in the back here too. Yes? Yes. So that's the key question here. We could actually ask a firm to do that. If we were to do away with accepting the funding, what would that change? What requirements or reporting or law? Not much. I mean, but you could have that done too as well. So thank you, ma'am.
Okay, but we are just talking cost analysis, right? I don't, okay, yeah, Board Member Davis, do you have one?
Well, I think that goes back to Vice Chair Hart's question. I actually didn't even fully understand that I thought we would, if the ROI wasn't great, it would free us of some of these strings, if you will, or restrictions or whatnot, but you're saying we would need to follow those laws. I imagine if it was a grant situation, then we wouldn't get the money and we would be free of the strings. But when it comes to the laws, that's not the case. My question is, I'm so sorry, Vice Chair Earl's going to be super frustrated with me because maybe I am just completely dense. But the thing that gave me buy-in to this in the beginning was all these new changes for Title IX. And even though the money doesn't flow through our SEA, but it still is impacting our LEAs, and it will have a great impact statewide. What is that going to be? How much is it going to cost? How do we navigate that? That's what was interesting in the very first place. Other than, I mean, the ROI was interesting, but that's really what compelled me to get involved to answer some of those questions.
Okay, the motion, yeah. So the motion before the board is that that the board designate an additional $100,000 for available state discretionary funds for a total of $150,000 and direct staff to release again the request for proposal for the procurement of services of an external auditor accounting firm to perform an audit and analysis of federal programs at the state education agency level. Where's my thing? Okay. Hold on. I gotta find my. All right. We'll go ahead and start at the top. Board Member Bogus. Yes. Board Member Davis.
No.
Board Member Earls, a yes. Board Member Hart.
Yes.
Board Member Hymas.
Yes.
Board Member Carey.
Yes.
Board Member Lear.
No.
Board Member Norton. No. Board Member Rill.
I don't think she's.
Oh, she's not on. Board Member Straight.
No.
Board Member Wood.
No.
Okay, that motion fails. 5. I have 5 in favor and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opposed. It doesn't reach the level of 8. Who do you want me to read off? Okay, 4 was Bogus, Earl, Hart, Hymas, and Carey. And we can, I'll accept them. I said 5 and 5. Oh, in favor of, sorry, my apology, 4 in favor, 4, gotcha. So, so left on the agenda once again would be, we could carry over from yesterday, executive session, finish personnel, or,
I move we adjourn.
so, okay, the motion before the board is to adjourn. And I guess that's not a second, is it? That's non-debatable. All right, let's, Board Member Bogus.
Yes.
Board Member Davis.
Yes.
Board Member Earls, no. Board Member Hart.
Yes.
Okay, Board Member Hymas.
Yes.
Board Member Carey.
I haven't been here all day, so I'm going to vote now. I will do it.
Board Member Lear.
I can't even remember.
Did you want to adjourn or
My
not?
own- Yes, I made the motion. Yes, I want to adjourn. That's how.
Board Member Norton. Yes. Board Member Rill is not here. Board Member Straight.
Yes.
Board Member Wood?
Point of information.
Yes.
Was this executive session a continuance of yesterday's meeting?
Mm-hmm.
And have we continued this meeting at other, have we?
Would be next month.
So you just have to re-agendize it and, okay,
Mhm.
yes. Then I will vote yes, thank you.
Okay. So that passed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Passed and 2 noes. Board Member Carey. Or no, you were a yes. Oh, sorry. It was just me. Board Member Earl voted no on that, and I don't know why, because I got. Okay. All right. We're adjourned.
Chair, point of inquiry, is it possible to request for the special finance meeting we need to do and the special now full board meeting we need to do, can we request that on the Doodle poll or Google poll or whatever it's called, we get 4 options at least of windows of dates and times?
We have adjourned our meeting, and so
This
no, I'm
is
just
an
kidding, yes.
informal request.